What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Naruto Uzumaki was standing at the bridge, waiting for his teammates. Today was his 13th birthday, but Naruto was willing to bet that neither Sasuke Uchiha nor Sakura Haruno would remember, nor would they care that they had forgotten. Naruto was used to how little his teammates actually cared for him. He kept hoping and working hard to change their opinions, but so far he hadn't seen any change, and he wasn't holding his breath waiting for it to happen too. There was days he wished that he didn't care as much as he did. Maybe then it would be a little easier to deal with their rejection. Sighing, Naruto wished that he could forget his loneliness. He'd been alone for as long as he could remember, alone and abused. He wondered if he would ever find acceptance in the Konoha village. Looking up, Naruto stared at the Hokage mountain. His greatest dream was to be one of those on that mountain. The village would have to respect him then. Naruto could almost feel the happiness of never hiding another bruise, or painting on a fake grin so that his teammates couldn't see how much they hurt him with their carelessness. Maybe then, Naruto would understand what it meant to have a true friend. Until then, Naruto would continue to work as hard as he could to become a strong ninja. He would somehow harness the pain of carelessly made comments and turn that into energy he could use. He couldn't allow his depression to defeat him. Naruto heaved another sigh, growing more irritated and bored by the second. It seemed like his teammates were taking forever to get there. Usually you could always count on Sasuke to be on time, and Sakura always arrived a few minutes later after the Uchiha. Maybe Sasuke suddenly realized he could live without revenge and went to the hospital to get checked. Naruto muttered to himself, though he knew the chances of that ever happening were slim. Sasuke thrived on the idea of getting stronger so that he could get revenge for his fallen clan. Sasuke was always claiming to be better than Naruto, and Naruto, not being an idiot, could admit to himself that Sasuke was somewhat better than him. He just wouldn't let his rival know that. Naruto had a stronger work ethic, so he firmly believed he would be the better ninja. He didn't have Sasuke's baggage weighing him down. He didn't mind letting the Teme know either. Naruto thought Sasuke should be taken down a peg or two. No one liked someone who constantly bragged about their abilities. Not that anyone liked Naruto to begin with. As Naruto continued pacing back and forth impatiently, he wondered if he had gotten their meeting place wrong. They had always met at the bridge for training. Naruto wouldn't have put it past Sakura to tell him they were meeting at the bridge, when in reality they were meeting somewhere else. Naruto knew that Sakura wanted as much alone time with Sasuke as she could get. Naruto almost felt sorry for Sasuke for having to constantly put up with Sakura's plans, but then Naruto wondered what it would be like to have someone pursue him like that, and anything he felt for Sasuke vanished. Tired of pacing, Naruto flopped down in the grass and stared up at the blue sky. What a wonderful birthday this was turning out to be, Naruto thought glumly. I have no one to celebrate it with. At least the villagers were leaving him alone. Naruto supposed that was something to be grateful for. Even as he thought that, he had the feeling the villagers would soon find him. They wouldn't have to look very hard to know where the loud-mouthed ninja was. Why can't I be normal? Naruto wondered out loud. Why must everyone hate me? Is it a bad thing for me to even have one friend? Naruto had wondered why no one had ever liked him, and had abused him so often. He had soon come to understand that he housed the nine-tailed demon fox. Naruto couldn't understand why the people thought he was the demon when he only kept it from destroying the village again. Naruto wondered what his life would have been like had the fox demon never been sealed inside of him. Would he have a father and a mother to come home to? Would his father ground him for getting bad grades? Would his mother comfort him when he was getting bullied at school? Would they both encourage him to become the best ninja he could be? Naruto knew he would never know the answers to these questions, and he felt lonelier knowing that he wouldn't. Naruto desperately longed for a friend that could understand the pain he lived with every single day. Naruto also knew that was asking too much of the people of Konoha. They cared about everyone except the lonely boy, who so very badly needed someone to care about him. Naruto wished he could make people understand that just because he housed the demon, it didn't make him the demon. As Naruto lay there staring up at the sky, wondering what his life in the future would be like, when he heard an irritated let loose a string of curse words. Sitting up, Naruto stared curiously at the forest, wondering why it sounded like Sasuke was fighting against someone. Die, already, Naruto heard someone call out. and somehow Naruto knew that whoever Sasuke was fighting weren't genin level. Sensing that his teammate was in serious trouble, Naruto pushed himself to his feet. Sasuke was a strong fighter, but if Naruto was correct in his thinking, then Sasuke still couldn't beat whomever he was fighting by himself. A few minutes later, Naruto appeared beside a breathless Sasuke. "Need some help?" Naruto asked as he dodged a kunai thrown from one of the enemy ninja. Sasuke glared at Naruto, as if it was Naruto's fault he had been attacked in the first place. "I don't need your help." Sasuke huffed out a breath of air. "Looks like you do to me," Naruto muttered, refusing to let Sasuke see how much his careless comment had hurt him. Naruto glanced at Sasuke before turning his attention back to the group that was starting to surround them. Taking a look at the headbands, Naruto noted they were from the Sound Village. He could tell from their fighting skills they were at least Junin level, which made Naruto wonder why 8 Junin level nins sent after 1 genin. Something wasn't adding up. Even as strong as Sasuke was, even he couldn't take on 8 top level nin. "It's the 9-tailed brat," a dark-haired man sneered as he approached Naruto. Sasuke had been struggling to take in air, but when heard the words the nin muttered, he turned and stared at Naruto. "Poor little Naruto. I guess your teammate doesn't know that you're really the demon fox that destroyed this village 13 years ago today." The nin sneered again and Naruto glared, feeling Sasuke's stare on his back. They weren't supposed to know about it. Naruto glared as he reached down for a kunai, but before he could throw it, Naruto felt a sharp kick to his chest, sending Naruto flying backwards. Wincing, as he stared up at the sky, he wondered how the nin had moved that fast. Naruto started to stand, but another rib-crushing kick landed to Naruto's side, leaving him gasping for air. Before Naruto realized it, he was surrounded by 8 ninja, and various kicks and punches were thrown his way, at such a pace that he couldn't even form a shadow clone to defend himself. As Naruto glanced through a sea of legs, he saw Sasuke running away. Did Sasuke lead those nin here? Naruto wondered, was their real purpose to get their hands on the last Sharingan or the 9-tailed demon? Naruto should have known that Sasuke wouldn't stick around to help him out. After all, Naruto didn't think that Sasuke really understood what the term teammates truly meant. As Naruto felt another snapping rib, he couldn't help but cry out in pain. If they continued the beating like this, Naruto knew he wouldn't survive. The fox couldn't heal all the injuries he was getting. Naruto struggled to go push himself to his feet, but he felt 2 feet slam into the side of his head, and Naruto felt an excruciating pain burst in both of his ears, and at once the world went silent, making Naruto wonder what exactly had happened. Tears streamed down Naruto's face, as he saw one of the nin pull out a kunai, and Naruto could only watch as the nin slashed through Naruto's right eye, causing the 13-year-old to scream in pain as blood began pouring down his face. "Let's see 9 tails heal that," the nin hissed, knowing Naruto couldn't hear him. That kunai was poisoned, and the more the demon tries to heal him, the more poison he will receive and the weaker and weaker he will get. Eventually it will kill the fox, along with the brat. Then we can do whatever we want to the Leaf Village. Naruto could only squirm in pain, his good and bad eye squeezed shut. Deaf in both ears, Naruto didn't see or hear the leaf nin that came to Naruto's defense, Sasuke leading them. The proud teen had known they had been too much for him or Naruto to handle on their own, so he had made a quick escape to find Kakashi as soon as Naruto had gotten involved. Now seeing his teammates' condition, he wondered if that had been the best decision to make. After Sasuke had explained the situation to Kakashi and Asuma, they had gathered a few more Junin and had headed to the forest. Sasuke had been shocked to see how brutally Naruto had been beaten. After the Sound Nin had been captured, Sasuke had stood behind Kakashi as he kneeled next to the fallen teen. "Naruto," Kakashi called out, unaware that Naruto wasn't able to hear him. "Naruto, can you open your eyes for me?" "Kakashi-sensei," Sasuke said quietly, "I don't think he can hear you. He's got blood coming out of his ears." Kakashi hissed in anger, seeing the blood, knowing it wasn't a good sign for the young ninja. Sasuke winced at the bloody gash going through Naruto's eye. He wondered if Naruto would ever be a ninja again after this. With the bloody gash through Naruto's eye and the blood coming out of Naruto's ears, he knew life was about to change for Naruto. Those ninjas said he was the 9-tailed demon fox. Sasuke said, his eyes glued to Naruto's face. He might not have liked the kid, but that didn't mean he wanted Naruto to be hurt. Nine tails is sealed in him. That doesn't make him the demon, Kakashi muttered, as he stood with Naruto in his arms. You can't speak of nine tails being sealed in Naruto. He added, if the villagers were to hear, they would likely attack Naruto, and with him being in the shape he's in, they would likely kill him. I thought the fox could heal him? Sasuke asked, remembering a rumor he had heard. He can and is, but I don't know why he's not doing anything right now. The nin mentioned the kunai was poisoned, Sasuke recalled thoughtfully. He mentioned it as he slashed Naruto's eye, although at that point I don't believe Naruto could actually hear him. Even if it was poisoned, the amount that entered through the eye shouldn't affect the nine tails. Kakashi said, as they ran through the forest and towards the village. Every time Kakashi hit a bump, he hit Naruto's ribs and the boy cried out in pain. Kakashi knew his young student had a few broken ribs and it hurt his heart every time Naruto cried out. Kakashi wouldn't put it past a Konoha villager to do this, but to have someone from the Sound Village left Kakashi with a few questions. No one outside the village was supposed to know about Nine Tails. So how did the Sound know? And why attack Naruto? What was their purpose in doing so? Why send 8 Junin after 1 Genin? Nothing made sense. Sasuke followed Kakashi to the hospital, training all but forgotten in the light of the current events. He figured training would be cancelled anyways because Naruto couldn't exactly fight in his current condition. Sasuke was wondering if Naruto would ever be able to fight again because Sasuke believed Naruto wouldn't be able to see out of his right eye again. That slash had been pretty deep, the damage obvious. Sasuke didn't know a lot about medical things, but even he could tell there had been a lot of damage to the eyeball. Sasuke didn't think there was a medic alive that could heal Naruto now, except for the fox. If they could get the poison out, then maybe the fox could start healing him. At the hospital, Sasuke and Kakashi were left in the waiting room. Sasuke was staring out the window lost in thought. Naruto woke up in more pain than he had ever been in before. He couldn't see out of his right eye and the pain that was coming from that area was agonizing, and that pain didn't include the broken ribs or where he'd been kicked in the head. Naruto didn't understand why he was at the hospital anyways. The fox should have healed him already. Something else that worried Naruto was the fact that the room should have been buzzing with sound, but Naruto couldn't hear a word that was being said. Naruto knew he should be worried, but at the moment he couldn't bring himself to care. He was in too much pain. Several minutes later, it seemed like the medic nins had done what they could for Naruto and Naruto was placed in a room. To him it didn't feel like they had done much because his ribs were on fire and his head was hurting so badly, he wanted to cry. As Naruto lay there barely conscious, he wondered what his injuries meant for him as a ninja. Even if he could still see out of his eye, he couldn't hear anything. What kind of ninja would that make him? Not a very good one to be sure. If Naruto couldn't be a ninja, what was he supposed to do for the rest of his life? Because of Nine Tails no one would hire him, and without money he would be kicked out of his apartment. Sighing, Naruto turned to stare out the window. Worrying could do him no good right now, but what else could he do? He was completely alone with no one to care that he was now permanently disabled with no hope of being able to continue as a ninja. Naruto's life as he knew it was over. Kakashi was sitting in the waiting room, wondering if he should go inform the third Hokage of the current events. Those nin could pose a threat to the Leaf Village, but first Kakashi had to find out the condition of his student. A few minutes later he heard hurried footsteps coming his way, and the masked nin looked up. Iruka and Sakura were coming his way. What happened? Sakura asked at the same time that Iruka asked. How is he? I'm not sure yet, Kakashi answered Iruka's question, knowing the teacher truly cared for Naruto. Sasuke was attacked and Naruto went to help, which I believe was the plan because Sasuke wasn't really harmed. Which is suspicious because they were Junin level. Why would they attack Naruto? Sakura asked. He talks big but he couldn't defend himself against someone like them. I don't know, Kakashi replied, but it's something that needs to be figured out. This shouldn't have happened, Iruka murmured as he sat down beside Kakashi. A few minutes later a doctor exited the emergency room doors with a grim look on his face. Kakashi somehow knew the news wasn't going to be good, and his heart ached even more for his student, whose only dream was to be a ninja. How is he? Iruka asked as soon as the doctor was close. Naruto's condition is stable, the doctor replied. He has a concussion and 5 broken ribs. Those aren't injuries we need to worry about. Naruto's eardrums were busted, Probably from a kick, unfortunately, that has left him completely deaf. Another serious injury is the slash to the eye. That movement would have blinded him anyways, but with the poison it was so much worse. The poison has completely eaten the pupil and unfortunately the damage is irreversible. Can he still be a ninja? Iruka asked, knowing the answer but not wanting to admit it. The doctor shook his head no. Unfortunately, no, the doctor said, unless you can find someone to heal his injuries he won't be able to continue. Kakashi sighed. He hated that his had happened today of all days. This makes his birthday real special, Iruka said bitterly. He's only ever wanted to be a ninja. What's he going to do now? No one will hire him to work, he'll get kicked out of his apartment. No, he won't, Kakashi and Sasuke said at the same time. He will always have a place to live. Kakashi added, if I have to adopt him myself. He's going to need someone, Iruka said, someone to help him get adjusted to being disabled. I am more than qualified to help, besides if he's with me. People won't bother him, Kakashi stated, knowing that was one of Iruka's worries as well. You're right, Iruka agreed, wishing he could take Naruto, but he knew Naruto was better off with Kakashi. Kakashi could after all protect Naruto better. And in the coming days, Naruto was going to need a lot of protection. Naruto regained consciousness a few hours later, in the hospital. At first he barely remembered what had happened for him to end up there. He could feel the bandage wrapping around his right eye. He thought it was strange that his room was so quiet when it should have been alive with noise, but he couldn't hear a thing. Turning his head, Naruto saw Iruka, Kakashi and Sakura and Sasuke waiting at the window. Kakashi and Iruka were talking quietly amongst themselves. Sasuke and Sakura were both staring out the window, with thoughtful expressions on their face. Iruka, Naruto spoke softly, catching his former teacher's attention. Iruka immediately turned towards Naruto. The teacher had a worried frown on his face. Naruto didn't like it. Someone like Iruka didn't need to worry about him. Naruto, Iruka mouthed silently, hating that his young student couldn't hear him and could barely see him. How do you feel? Like I gotten beaten out of my misery. Naruto muttered, I don't think there is a single part of me that doesn't hurt. I'm sure the doctors can give you something for it. Iruka mouthed, hating the pain he could see in Naruto's good eye. He turned and called for the doctor. He wasn't going to let Naruto suffer needlessly. 5 minutes later the doctor was sliding a needle into Naruto's IV. And a few minutes later Naruto was drifting off to sleep. Once the young ninja was asleep, Iruka turned to face the doctor. He wanted to know what they were going to do about the poison floating around Naruto's bloodstream. What about the poison? Can anything be done about it? Iruka asked. The poison was obviously causing Naruto excruciating pain. We can extract it, but the whole process won't be easy for his body to deal with. Which is why we are waiting for his body to rest before we start the extraction. The doctor replied. The process can't be any more agonizing than the pain he is in right now. Iruka pointed out, I would think that it would be more important to get it out than to let his body rest. If we don't let him rest, when we extract it, the pain will likely cause him to have health issues, possibly for the rest of his life. The doctor replied, but Iruka still didn't like his answer. I can promise you as soon as possible, we will remove it. We won't let him suffer any more than necessary. Couldn't prove it by me. Sasuke muttered, turning away from the window to glare at the doctor. If his health was so important, you would go on and remove it now, while he is barely conscious. I think you want the poison to harm him, so you don't have to deal with what Naruto holds. That's not true, the doctor stammered, making everyone in the room believe that he was lying. I'm a doctor, why would I let a poison stay in a person's bloodstream longer than it needs to be? Because you don't truly care about Naruto. Sasuke answered, feeling guilty for having ignored the blonde for so long, when he had known that Naruto was just as lonely as he was. You think this village would be better off without him? You think by waiting longer the poison will cause so much damage the fox can't fix him? Maybe you're right. The doctor hissed at Sasuke. This village doesn't need trash like him, waiting to destroy the village at the first chance he gets. Better to let him die now while he doesn't have any friends to mourn his loss. The Leaf Village will be better off without him. That's where you are wrong. Kakashi hissed, glaring from his spot beside Iruka. Now that he knew exactly what the doctor thought about his young student, Kakashi allowed the rage to fill him. Naruto does have people who care about what happens to him. You are looking at them, and after I get the Hokage, you are going to be lucky if you ever work in any land of fire hospital again. He won't take my job, the doctor laughed as he reached in his pocket and pulled out another syringe. He doesn't care about the fox demon. Nobody can love this boy because he is unlovable. I think the only here who is unlovable here is you, Iruka said, his voice coming out deadly calm. The doctor couldn't mistake the rage in Iruka's eyes. That boy has a heart triple times the size of yours. No matter how badly he is mistreated, he will still fight to protect you, even though you clearly would not do the same. He's just an animal, the doctor muttered, turning quickly and taking the needle and jabbing it into the crook of Naruto's elbow, quickly depressing the plunger and spilling the contents into Naruto's bloodstream. You're wrong in thinking I won't take your job, a chilly voice spoke from the doorway, having witnessed the last several minutes of conversation. Naruto isn't an animal, he's a lonely child, who deserves all the love the world can give. The third Hokage said from the doorway, before nodding at the Anbu guards to arrest the doctor. I am placing you under arrest for attempted murder. You better hope Naruto doesn't move into a more permanent state. A few minutes later the doctor was removed from the room, and was taken to jail, while the third Hokage went and found a non-biased doctor to take care of Naruto. A few minutes after Naruto's room had emptied of everyone but his teammates and former teacher, he began to violently seize on the bed. Iruka could only watch in horror as Naruto's head slammed repeatedly into his pillow, his limbs flying every which way, while a foam-like substance spilled from his lips. Hang on, Naruto! Iruka cried out, knowing the boy couldn't hear him. Go get help! He called to Sasuke and Sakura, who were both frozen in place. Kakashi, now standing beside the bed, trying to keep Naruto turned on his side so he wouldn't choke. He had never imagined something like this happening to the 13-year-old. He should have known though, because everywhere they went, people seemed to pick up the Leaf Village's hatred of Naruto. Kakashi wished they could see sense. Just because Naruto housed the demon, it didn't make him the demon himself. Why couldn't people understand that and see past Naruto's troublemaking ways? To the boy was only lonely. Please, Naruto, Iruka pleaded as tears filled his eyes, as Naruto's body grew limp. Kakashi rolled him back onto his back, sure that the seizure was over. The longer he watched his badly beaten student, the angrier he became. He wanted to know how the Sound had known that Naruto housed the nine-tailed demon. Were they testing some kind of poison on the tailed beasts? And if so, why? What was their endgame? To end up controlling them. From what Kakashi could tell from what they had done to Naruto, it didn't offer them any control over the nine tails. Do you think he's going to be okay, sensei? Sakura asked quietly after Sasuke had disappeared to find help. I don't know, Kakashi replied. I don't know what that so-called doctor gave him. He went silent, his thoughts taking over. He hoped that whatever had been in that syringe wasn't something that worked with the poison and killing Naruto. Kakashi wanted to go give that man a dose of whatever it was, because it was clearly causing Naruto even more pain, on top of the injuries that he already had. As if sensing Kakashi's thoughts, Naruto let out a pained-sounding moan, before turning on his side and curling into a ball, yelping when he hurt his broken ribs. Iruka reached out and gently pushed Naruto onto his back. Naruto opened his eyes, his pained blue orbs meeting Iruka's before rolling back, as his body began thrashing once more. Naruto! Sakura cried out in horror, tears filling her eyes at the sight before her. She couldn't believe this was happening. She'd always thought the kid annoying, but having watched him suffer the effects of the beating and poison was heart-wrenching, and not to mention, seeing just how little the people in the village thought of him. It was enough to break her heart and make her vow to treat him better. It was a shame it took something like this to change their hearts, and Sakura was ashamed of herself for having taken so long to see a desperately lonely boy. She was only 13 herself, so she really couldn't be expected to have been completely mature about the situation when he was annoying her, but she could make up for the pain she had caused him. She vowed that once Naruto was released from the hospital, she would do what she could to help him. A few minutes later they were shoved out of the room, when the doctor Sasuke had fetched, saw what was happening to the young teen on the bed. You better not harm him, Iruka growled, feeling extremely protective over the boy seizing on the bed. I have no intention of harming him, the doctor replied before crossing the room, and gently opening Naruto's eyelid. That's what the last doctor said, Sasuke muttered, staring at his now limp teammate lying on the bed. The doctor gave him a shot of something. He didn't start seizing until then. It sounds like it's reacting with the poison. The doctor said thoughtfully, we are going to have to extract the poison as quickly as possible, but unfortunately for Naruto, it's not going to be a pain-free process. Iruka growled, feeling frustrated. He didn't want Naruto to suffer anymore. He had already suffered more than enough. If there was any way I could avoid the painful process, I would, the doctor assured Iruka, but right now, we have to extract it before it does any more damage to the brain. That's why he's seizing, because whatever the other doc gave him, sped up the poison and it's already reached the brain. What does that mean? Iruka asked, fear filling his voice. Naruto is dying unless we can remove the poison and counter the effects. The doctor replied as he hit the nurse call button. He didn't have time to discuss everything with the boy's teammates and friends, not if they didn't want the boy to die. It was a shame he hadn't been called in on this case before the other doctor had. He wouldn't have tried to speed up the boy's death. Unlike everyone else in this village, he didn't believe that Naruto was the nine-tailed demon. Don't let him die, Iruka pleaded, as they exited the room, when several other nurses entered the room, bringing the supplies they needed to remove the poison. I give you my word, I will do my best to keep him from dying. The doctor promised before shutting the door, so that they could get to work. Iruka followed Kakashi and the other two students into the waiting room. He was still having a hard time processing the information the doctor had given him. The poison had already reached Naruto's brain. How much damage had already been done? And how much of it was fixable? Tears filled Iruka's eyes as his mind brought up all the possibilities, and not all of them were positive. What if Naruto had been severely brain damaged and he needed special care for the rest of his life? What if the poison had done so much damage that Naruto was a vegetable, unable to speak or breath on his own, depending on machines and the kindness of others to live? That was no kind of life for the little troublemaker Iruka had come to love. If that happened though, Iruka would give up his career as a ninja to take care of Naruto. Iruka didn't trust anyone else besides Kakashi to give Naruto the kind of care that he needed. Whatever you were thinking, Iruka, don't, Kakashi said quietly from where he was sitting beside the other man. Naruto needs positive thoughts, not the kind that you are thinking. The doctor said the poison has already reached his brain. I can't help but think about the damage it's already caused. Iruka replied, looking down at the ground. He couldn't imagine Naruto as a vegetable. The kid was in constant motion. To see him so still was incredibly hard. Maybe whatever damage has been done can be reversed. Kakashi pointed out, maybe once they get the poison out, the fox can do something for him. I doubt he'll be able to fix everything, Iruka muttered. He didn't want Naruto to be damaged at all, but he seriously doubted the fox could fix Naruto's hearing or the sight in the one eye. Maybe not, Kakashi said, but we will help him. He doesn't have to give up his dream just yet. Iruka looked at him and frowned. He hoped Kakashi was right, because if anyone deserved to see their dreams come true, it was Naruto. After a moment's silence, they heard a loud, shrill scream come from down the hall, where Naruto's room was. Iruka winced, knowing that they were removing the poison. He wanted to be able to hold Naruto while they were doing it, so that Naruto could know that he wasn't alone, but he knew it was best that they stay out of their way. About an hour later, the doctor exited the room and headed towards where he knew Naruto's friends waited. He was glad that someone cared about the boy, because it was going to take a lot of love to get Naruto through the coming days and weeks. How is he? Iruka asked as soon as he had caught sight of the doctor coming their way. We were able to remove the poison, but only time will tell if the damage left by the poison will ever be fixable. The doctor replied, wishing he'd had better news for them. It looked like the poison had done quite a bit of damage to his brain, but in removing the poison, I am hoping that the fox will start healing him. Though I am not sure how much the fox can fix. Can we sit with him? Iruka asked, his eyes once more welling with tears. None of this was fair. Naruto hadn't really found a place where he felt like he belonged and was accepted. Why did this have to happen now? Iruka felt that if given time, Naruto's teammates would have come to accept Naruto the way he was. Now they had to figure out how to accept him as the damaged boy he had recently become. Yes, the doctor said, you never know, he might feel you with him and it might encourage him to fight a little harder. If it's anything he knows how to do, Iruka muttered, it's fight. He's been fighting his entire life. I don't see him stopping now. He won't, Kakashi assured him, but he has to know there is a reason for him to fight. He looked over at Sakura and Sasuke. You two have treated him just as bad as the rest of the villagers. Sasuke, you left in the middle of a fight that he came to help you with. Kakashi shook his head as Sasuke started to protest. I realize you went to get help, but maybe if you had stayed with him, he wouldn't have been injured so badly. How would you have known about the fight then? Someone had to get help. Sasuke snarled at Kakashi, his anger flaring hot. He had only good intentions when he'd left Naruto, why couldn't anyone see that? Sakura, I am sure would have noticed when you weren't at the meeting spot when you were supposed to be. Kakashi pointed out. We would have figured out that something was wrong. It would only have taken us a matter of time to find you. Sasuke glared and turned his back to Kakashi and stared out the window, refusing his teammates the opportunity to see his guilt. Sasuke had known he'd been wrong to treat Naruto like he had, but he had his reasons. He couldn't afford friends when he had so much at stake right now with his brother. Anyone considered a friend, Itachi would harm and use against Sasuke, possibly even killing them. Sasuke couldn't allow that to happen, even if it meant being heartless to his teammates. He wished they understood how much he did not want them to come to harm, but in the end he supposed it was probably better going this way. Better if everyone thought he was as heartless as he often felt like he was. Sasuke didn't like it, but he had the feeling he was going to have to prove that he didn't care about either of his teammates. Iruka sat beside the comatose Naruto, silently hoping and praying that Naruto would find the will and the strength to live. Iruka didn't know what he was going to do if he lost Naruto. The world would never know what a kind heart Naruto truly had if they lost him. Kakashi kept telling him to not think of the negative, but Iruka couldn't help it when he saw the condition his former student was in. Iruka didn't want this life for Naruto, he wanted something peaceful and happy. But Iruka also knew that Naruto wouldn't be happy unless he was a ninja and he had something to work towards. He's going to be okay, you know that, don't you? Kakashi asked quietly. He firmly believed Naruto would pull through with flying colors. There was just something about the kid that made you believe that he could do anything. He had always known that Naruto had been his sensei's son. He believed that Minato would be disgusted at how Naruto was currently being treated. Heads would roll for what had just happened to the boy. If there was a way for Kakashi to make that happen, he would. He wouldn't allow anyone from his village or any other village to attack his own student. Just sitting here, I am wondering how it's going to be okay. Iruka replied, looking over at the masked nin sitting beside him. It's looking like he is permanently disabled. There is no way he can continue as a ninja. The only thing he has ever wanted, and he can't do it anymore. Maybe not, Kakashi answered, his mind already whirling with possibilities. It all depended on how much the fox could heal. If there was any way possible to help Naruto succeed at his dream, Kakashi would find it. It was the least he could do for his sensei's son. Kakashi also thought it wouldn't hurt to have Sasuke and Sakura help either, since neither of them had exactly been welcoming or friendly towards Naruto from the time that he had been placed on their team. Already, Kakashi could see the concern fading from Sasuke's eyes, and that bothered him more than he let on. Sasuke needed to realize it was okay to grieve and miss the ones he had lost, but he needed to let go of his need for vengeance because it was killing his chance for any sort of normal relationship. Sasuke might think that he didn't care about those things, but once he'd gotten even his brother and he was left alone with his bitterness and anger, he would realize just how badly he'd screwed. Kakashi didn't want that for him. He wanted Sasuke to let his anger go and be free from the pain he had to be feeling constantly. Turning back to Naruto, he looked down at the young blonde lying so still. It had a difficult 24 hours, that was only growing more difficult the longer they waited for Naruto to wake up. Kakashi knew the coming days would be filled with a lot of anger and depression from Naruto. Kakashi believed these would be the days that Naruto discovered just how strong he already was. Looking over at his other two students staring out the window, he noted their exhausted expressions. They had all been here since Naruto had been brought in several hours ago. The fact that Sasuke and Sakura were still here surprised him. Kakashi was well aware of how they both felt about Naruto. For the boys' sake, Kakashi hoped that they saw this situation as a chance to grow and mature into better people and ninjas. He hoped they would recognize how wrong they were to treat Naruto the way they did, but he had the feeling their attitudes wouldn't change for some time. Sakura, you and Sasuke should head on home now. Iruka and I will stay with Naruto. If anything happens, I will have one of my dogs let you know. Kakashi said solemnly. They would still have to do some training tomorrow and he didn't want them exhausted for it. Okay, sensei, Sakura replied without arguing. She was exhausted and wasn't sure how much longer she could stand on her feet. While she didn't like what had happened to Naruto, a small part of her wondered if he had done something to deserve it. He was all the time getting on her nerves, so it truly wouldn't have surprised her. Don't get her wrong, she felt bad that Naruto would have to stop his career as a ninja, but she wondered if maybe that was for the best. Some people just weren't cut out to be ninja after all. Not bothering to see if Sasuke was coming, Sakura headed for the door, too exhausted to care about very much. The events of the day had been completely unexpected. The results from said day were even more surprising and not in a good way. Once the two younger ninja had left, Kakashi turned towards Iruka. He had been thinking that it might be smarter to move Naruto from this hospital, so that no more unexpected attacks could happen. Kakashi knew there were several doctors here who wouldn't mind Naruto's death. He was going to prevent that if at all possible. I want to move him home with me, Kakashi told Iruka, staring at the other nin. I don't know if that's such a good idea right now. He's hurt pretty badly. Iruka replied, knowing that Kakashi just wanted to protect his young student. Naruto remaining in this hospital is not a good idea, Kakashi told him. There are other doctors who wouldn't mind harming Naruto. This place is not the best place for him. He would be much safer at home with me. I know that, Iruka said, but looking at him and knowing he's so badly injured, how can he go anywhere when he needs medical treatment? We find a doctor we can trust to come take care of him at my place. There are too many unknown factors that can't be controlled here. At least at home I can control them. Iruka didn't say anything but he nodded in agreement. Naruto was in pretty bad shape physically. He imagined that emotionally when he found out he could no longer be a ninja, he would be a wreck emotionally. I am going to speak with the Hokage about this situation, Kakashi said, standing to his feet. You'll let me know if he wakes up? Yes, Iruka replied, turning his attention back to Naruto, his thoughts taking him back to a time when Naruto was younger and even more badly mistreated than he was right now. The first time Iruka had seen Naruto, he'd been 6 years old and covered in dirt. Iruka's first thought was, didn't the kid know how to take a bath? It hadn't occurred to him that the boy's guardians didn't let him take a bath, or let him eat much food and never with them. The boy had been painfully shy, almost as if he had expected Iruka to hurt him. Iruka remembered how much that had hurt his heart. He didn't know why he hadn't recognized the signs of abuse for what they were, but Naruto had clearly paid for his mistake back then over 10 times what he should have had to go through. For a long time, Iruka had carried a resentment towards the boy, knowing full well Naruto was not the demon that had killed his parents, but knowing that a part of that beast existed within Naruto was still hard for Iruka to handle. Of course, the way Iruka felt about Naruto slowly changed, the more he watched Naruto and took notice that no one ever wanted anything to do with him. It hurt him deeply to watch the other kids making fun of him when Naruto would get kicked out of a store, or have rotten food thrown at him. One night, on his way home from a mission, Iruka had stumbled upon a badly beaten Naruto sleeping against the base of a tree. What bothered Iruka the most, other than the fact that Naruto had been beaten yet again, was the fact that kid was sleeping outside in the pouring rain. Iruka had awoken Naruto to find out why he wasn't in his apartment, and Naruto had told him that his landlord had kicked him out, because he couldn't afford the rent. So for the last few years, Naruto had lived with Iruka. Now Iruka believed it was time for Naruto to go elsewhere because he didn't believe he had the ability to keep Naruto safe. He loved Naruto and he wished it didn't have to come to this, but Naruto would be a whole lot safer with Kakashi. A few years ago, Iruka started knowing that Naruto couldn't hear him. I remember coming across you in town, and I remember seeing a dirty little boy, who looked like he hadn't had anything to eat for a week. I remember thinking, didn't he know how to take a bath? I was more concerned about you being dirty rather than the fact that you were hungry. I wish I could go back and change that. I should have bought you as many bowls of ramen as you could eat. I don't like how people treat you now, but looking back, I could have stopped a lot of your mistreatment but didn't. It was all because of the spirit that resides within you. I always knew that you weren't the fox itself, but knowing that, and knowing the fox killed my parents, leaving me alone, was hard to take. Iruka swallowed. I made so many mistakes. I could have changed the way things were for you a long time ago. The way I treated you and the way everyone else treats you isn't fair, but I promise things will change. You are going to stay with Kakashi because I know he can keep you safer than I can. I will come see you every chance I get. I don't ever want you to think that I abandoned you. I think you have lived with that happening enough in your life. I know you are probably going to think that your life is over because you can no longer be a ninja, but that's not true. I am going to help you find your way, just stay strong and keep believing in yourself. Iruka closed his eyes as a few tears dropped down his face. He hated this whole situation. He knew when Naruto found out he couldn't continue his career as a ninja because he was disabled he would be angry, and he had every right to be. Iruka hoped this situation wouldn't be what broke Naruto, but even if it did, he would be there for him every single step of the way. Naruto, don't ever stop fighting. I know this situation is going to be difficult for you to accept, and no one blames you for being angry and sad over the things you have lost. Know that you have people who are going to be there for you. That won't turn you away when you are hurting the most. Iruka finished softly, wishing that the events of this day had not occurred. Naruto was going to be forever changed, but one question remained: would it be for the good or bad? One would think that it wouldn't be a hard question to answer, but Naruto had had so much bad happen to him that it was bound to change him eventually. Would this be the time that it did? Iruka hoped not. Iruka hoped he stayed the same sweet, yet lonely troublemaker, but he had a hard time believing that that would happen. Whatever happened, Iruka had to remember that Naruto was a product of his environment. Years of mistreatment were bound to start affecting him, and changing Naruto in ways that no one expected. Iruka's heart broke thinking about it, and he was scared of the changes that Naruto would go through, but he silently vowed that no matter what he wouldn't abandon Naruto like so many others had. This time would be different. Iruka would make sure of that. A few hours later, Naruto opened his eyes owlishly, blinking at the harsh light that invaded his senses. For a moment he couldn't remember what had happened for him to end up here. Then he remembered the vicious beating he had received. He remembered Sasuke running away, and thinking that Sasuke had led them here so that they could hurt him. Anger, red and hot, burned in his veins, and for a moment Naruto hated Sasuke. How could his own teammate do that to him? Didn't Sasuke know that he was supposed to protect his teammates? Naruto would have done anything for him and Sakura. But judging by the lack of their presence, they wouldn't do the same for him. Naruto stared up at the ceiling. The vision in one eye was completely dark. He couldn't hear anything around him, and that scared Naruto more than anything, because he knew if he was completely deaf there was no way he could continue his career as a ninja. All his life, Naruto wanted to be someone the village loved and respected, but now he couldn't see how that could happen. He supposed that was something else he could thank Sasuke for, ruining his dream. Naruto turned his head and stared out the window, his anger blinding him. He wanted to hate everyone for allowing this to happen. If he had been someone normal, the villagers would never have felt the need to hate him, or to treat him as less than a human being. Maybe then Sasuke would have been his friend, and Sakura wouldn't act like she was too good to be friends with him. Maybe he would have ended up on a team that actually liked him and cared about what happened to him. Where was his teammates now? Even his teacher couldn't be bothered to be here. Was there anyone besides Iruka that cared about him? What did he do so bad, that he was treated like this? Like he didn't matter? A tear slipped from his eye and Naruto closed his eyes, trying to keep the tears back. He was tired of not ever being good enough for anyone. He wondered if they would even care if he just up and disappeared. Maybe then they would realize that Naruto was a real human being with feelings and emotions. He doubted they would honestly care, but maybe they would at least think about it. Who was he kidding? Even if he wanted to, Naruto doubted he could get out of this hospital without someone noticing. Naruto's ribs were still very tender, making him wonder about the fox. Did those sound nin do something that somehow blocked the fox from healing him? How did they even know about the fox to begin with? As far as Naruto knew, those who knew about it weren't supposed to talk about it. So did that mean that one of Konoha's own ninja betrayed him? The thought that someone could so easily do that to Naruto depressed him. Is getting treated like this really fair? Naruto thought it's not ever going to change, now that the chances of my continuing to be a ninja isn't very likely. Will I ever find someone that truly cares about me? These thoughts made Naruto want to leave the village and never return. The way he saw it, if he couldn't continue as a ninja he would have no way of making money, which meant he would end up homeless anyways, so by leaving and going somewhere that they didn't know him, maybe he could have a chance at finding happy. Then again, there was no way the third Hokage would allow him to leave because chances were he would fall into someone's hands that wanted to use him as a weapon against the Leaf Village. The more Naruto thought about his options, the more depressed he became, because he truly didn't have any options. He supposed he would have to wait and see what Iruka wanted to do with him. He knew he probably wouldn't continue to stay with the man he was starting to see as a dear older brother. He knew somehow that some troubled times were coming for the Leaf Village. The Sound Nin attacking seemed like a precursor to Naruto. The village needed to know why it was only Naruto that was attacked and what the Sound wanted with him. It was nothing good, Naruto was sure, but still, if he was in the village and the Sound came for him again, it just proved that he was more of a danger to the Leaf Village. Naruto wondered if the third Hokage thought about how much danger Naruto was putting the village in by staying there. Naruto shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. His next logical thought was that the only thing that they could do to keep the village safe was to execute him. Naruto wondered too if that was the best option for him anyways. It wasn't like anyone would miss him or anything, and Naruto would finally be free from the pain that he lived with on a daily basis. The thought that the village he loved could so easily kill him should have scared him, but it didn't. Closing his eyes, Naruto tried to drift off to sleep to dream of peace, something he didn't know very much about. Iruka had sat silently and watched Naruto when he'd felt the teen wake up. He knew there was a lot going through Naruto's mind right now, and Iruka wished he could help Naruto come to terms with his disabilities. The only thing he could really do was to be there and support him and encourage him to keep fighting. Iruka knew that dark thoughts would be Naruto's mind, and Iruka wanted to see him through it. He didn't want Naruto to do anything desperate, though after everything Naruto had dealt with in his young life, if that did happen, Iruka couldn't blame him for wanting some much-needed peace. "You are loved, Naruto," Iruka murmured. "I just hope you realize how much you truly are. And no matter what happens, I will be there for you." 30 minutes later, Kakashi arrives with the third Hokage right behind him. "Has he woken up at all?" Kakashi asked, looking at the sleeping teen. "He did for about 10 minutes, but he didn't say anything," Iruka replied, but he had seen the depressed look in Naruto's good eye and he hated it. "I think he already knows he won't be able to be a ninja anymore." "That's not necessarily true," Kakashi said. "I think I can come up with some training for him. Since he can't see out of the one eye or hear, his sense of smelling will become stronger. That is still a useful trait. It's too dangerous to allow him to continue." Iruka barked. "If he can't see or hear the enemy coming, how is he supposed to defend himself?" "Like I said, I can come up with some training that will allow him to continue. Besides, I would be with him. I wouldn't allow anything to happen to him." Kakashi replied, not fazed by the younger man's tone of voice. He knew Iruka was worried about Naruto, so it was understandable that Iruka would be angry about what was going on. "You mean like you wouldn't allow something like this to happen to him?" Iruka asked, bitterness clear in his voice. "If you had kept a better eye on him, letting him know where you were supposed to be meeting, then none of this would have happened. You can blame me if that makes you feel better, but know that had I known this was going to happen, I wouldn't have let him leave my sight, him or Sasuke both," Kakashi said calmly as he approached the bed. "Arrangements have been made, he will be coming home with me in a couple of hours. Let's hope you can keep a better eye on him then," Iruka muttered, still feeling angry at both himself and Kakashi. This situation should have been prevented. Kakashi ignored Iruka and reached down and touched a sleeping Naruto's cheek. He hoped that Naruto could pull through this and prove to be the survivor that Kakashi believed him to be. Of course, not far from his mind was what the council would want to do about this situation. He believed he knew what they would vote for, but if it came to that, he would take Naruto and leave the village. He promised his sensei that he would protect his son when the time came for it. Never was that time more apparent than it was now. Kakashi had to believe that the third Hokage wouldn't allow the council to make that decision, but you never knew what the council would order behind the Hokage's back. When Naruto next woke up, he noticed he wasn't in the hospital room anymore. Staring at the four walls in confusion, he wondered why he had been removed from the hospital. Throwing his legs over the side of the bed, he winced as he stood up. He wanted to know where he was. If they didn't want him in the hospital anymore, then why didn't they take him back to his apartment, instead of leaving him with some stranger? Naruto didn't like being around people he didn't know, too many unknown factors. And he had no way of knowing whether they would treat him with respect or not. He highly doubted it. In all of his 13 years, He had never once been treated with respect. He was starting to believe he didn't deserve it. A person could only take so much negative treatment before they start to believe they are at fault for it. Sitting up, Naruto winced at the pain in his ribs. He wanted to blame Sasuke for the shape he was in, blame him for losing his career, and for the things that were sure to come because of him losing his career. Naruto glared at the closed door in front of him. He didn't want to be here. He wanted to be somewhere he could be accepted and loved for who he was, not what he housed within him. Would anyone besides Iruka ever care about him? Naruto blinked back the tears he felt. He couldn't afford to get upset right now. He needed time to adjust to losing his career and his teammates, because he was sure he had already been replaced on Team 7. He didn't know how he would handle seeing the person who replaced him around town. It would hurt because more than anything he had wanted to be a career ninja and eventually the Hokage. How was he supposed to do that now? Naruto knew there would be scrolls that would help him adjust to being disabled. But he didn't want to adjust. He wanted to go back to normal, back to the boy he had been before all of this had happened. How was he supposed to live like this? Deaf and partially blind. He didn't want to live like this. If he could find a kunai, he would end it. He wouldn't have to live like the unwanted monster who imposed on those around him. His decision made, Naruto threw his legs over the side of the bed, narrowing his good eye on the door in front of him. He was still sore, but now that he had a plan, he didn't mind it as much. He wondered as he walked slowly and carefully towards the door. Naruto knew he was in Kakashi's apartment, so it shouldn't be too hard to find a kunai. What he didn't expect to see was a scowling Sasuke sitting on Kakashi's couch, staring out the window at the rain. A feeling of dread filled Naruto. What was Sasuke doing here? Clearly Kakashi was nowhere in sight, so that made Naruto wonder if Sasuke was supposed to be his babysitter. That thought made him scowl harder. He didn't need a babysitter, although what he was planning on doing might indicate that he did indeed need a sitter. Ignoring Sasuke, Naruto decided he was going to continue with his plans, because he knew Sasuke wouldn't care one way or the other. The only thing the Uchiha cared about was getting revenge on his brother. Walking past Sasuke, Naruto felt the other boy's eyes on his back, watching him closely. Naruto wanted to say something to throw Sasuke off, but what? It would have to be cruel, and the thing about that was, he knew that his teammates didn't believe that he had a cruel bone in his body. He didn't believe it either. Because he knew how it was to be treated cruelly and didn't want anyone else to know just how that felt. But if Naruto was going to do this, he had to do something. Turning around quickly, Naruto surprised Sasuke, bringing a deeper scowl on the other boy's face. "Where is Kakashi?" Naruto asked and watched as Sasuke's lips moved, but no sound was heard. Naruto scowled, wishing he knew of a way to communicate properly. "I don't need a babysitter, so you can go away." Naruto looked down at the floor. He had barely been living as a disabled person and he already hated it. What good was a life like this? Looking back up, he was surprised to find Sasuke holding a scroll with some written words. "Kakashi had some business to attend to. He left me with you so that you wouldn't be lonely and in case you needed something." Naruto scowled, wondering when anyone had ever cared about him being lonely. As far as needing anything, he needed a kunai, but he didn't suppose that Sasuke would help him with that, even if the black-haired boy did hate him. Heaving a sigh, and wincing when it made his sore ribs ache, Naruto continued his journey into Kakashi's room. He knew his sensei would have some kunai stored somewhere in the room. It was just a matter of finding it. Entering the room, Naruto took in its spotless appearance. Turning on the light, he made his way to the most obvious place in the room. He was pretty sure Kakashi would leave his weapons somewhere near him, in case he would need them for any reason. Naruto kneeled down beside the bed and reached under it, his fingers feeling the sharp prick of a shuriken. Pulling it out, Naruto stared at it for a moment, before shrugging. The star would work just as well as a kunai would, and someone in his condition couldn't afford to be picky. Sasuke had a bad feeling. Naruto was up to no good when he watched the blonde boy head into Kakashi's room. He had tried stalling him with the scroll, but Sasuke could the determination in Naruto's eyes. Whatever Naruto planned, it wasn't going to be good. So when Naruto turned his back to Sasuke, Sasuke had followed Naruto into Kakashi's room. It didn't take long for Naruto to find what he was looking for, and Sasuke wondered how he would be expected to put a stop to Naruto and get help at the same time. He was irritated with Naruto for putting him in this position, Surely the kid could find some way to deal with his disability. It wasn't like he had to kill himself because he couldn't learn to cope with it. What Sasuke didn't understand was that Naruto didn't want to learn to cope with it. Naruto didn't want to suffer anymore and be a burden on those around him. Naruto knew that the only reason Sasuke was hanging around right now was because Kakashi wanted him to. Sasuke wasn't here because he wanted to be, but because someone made him. Naruto wanted to find his own friends. He didn't want people who were forced to be friends with him. How could people build a real friendship like that? You couldn't. The friendship would be built on lies, and that was no way for a friendship to last. Sighing, Naruto brought the shuriken to his wrist, and just as he was about to slice his wrist, he felt an hand grab and pulled a star away from him. Looking up, he saw Sasuke staring at him. For a moment Naruto saw concern in Sasuke's eyes before it flashed over to anger. Naruto didn't expect Sasuke to understand how he was feeling. After all, the Uchiha didn't have to give up his dreams of revenge. Naruto had to give up everything he ever dreamed of, all because someone didn't know how to keep a secret. Naruto wondered if Sasuke had known his secret all along, and if he was the one who had betrayed him to the Sound Village. Something told him, Sasuke wasn't responsible, that someone else in the village was. But Naruto didn't know who that could be. He wasn't going to find out either, because no one would be interested in telling him anything. But he bet Kakashi could find something out. If he was the bad guy, he didn't want to mess with Kakashi. The man was a legend. Now Naruto wondered if even Kakashi could keep him safe. Glaring at Sasuke, Naruto pushed himself to his feet and reached for the shuriken that Sasuke held away from him. Why didn't Sasuke understand that Naruto couldn't live like this, that he didn't want to live like this? It was unfair of them to ask this of him. Didn't Naruto deserve to be happy? Leave me alone, Sasuke, Naruto muttered. Just let me die so I can finally have some peace for once in my life. Naruto turned away, refusing to face Sasuke anymore. Feeling an impatient tug on his shirt, Naruto turned around to see a scowling Sasuke holding up a scroll with his writing on it. Why do you want to die? Isn't it bad enough that you got beaten? Do you not think about what that would do to the people around you? Naruto scowled. Who cared about the people around him would feel? Most didn't like Naruto anyways, so why should their feelings be taken into account? When Naruto's feelings were always ignored. You don't get it, Sasuke, Naruto muttered before looking down at the floor. Nobody cares how I feel. They never have. Maybe I am just a little bit tired of dealing with that all the time. Adding my disabilities, how long do you think it will be before someone takes advantage of me or tires too? Naruto sighed, before sitting down and leaning back against the bed. I'm tired, Sasuke, so tired. It's not fair that I continually put up with people and their hate. Do you want me to suffer every single day? Sasuke shook his head before writing something else down on the scroll and holding it up for Naruto to read. I never thought of you as a coward before. You were always the one to keep going and believing in yourself even when you did have people cheering for your demise. Have you really been such a coward all this time? Naruto scowled harder when he seen what Sasuke had written. I'm not a coward, but while you have been lonely and angry because of what happened to the family that at one time you had the chance of knowing, I was putting up with people hating me for something I had no control over, and by the way I never knew my parents, which I think is worse than having them or losing them, because I have always been lonely and have longed for a family of my own. It sucks what happened to your family, but bad things happen and you can't always stop them. So until you get over what you have lost and stop focusing on revenge, don't call me a coward. You have no idea what it is to walk in my footsteps every single day. If I want to die, then let me, because it would be better than this senseless existence that I live in now. Naruto yelled as tears filled his eyes. For that brief moment he truly hated Sasuke. Everyone loved him and he couldn't see beyond his need for revenge. If only Sasuke could look beyond that, then maybe he would realize that he is not as alone as he thought he was. Sasuke didn't understand either that Naruto was always going to be alone. He would always have someone who hated him, and as much as Naruto wanted to change that, he couldn't, at least not now with his disabilities. If you would look beyond your disabilities, then maybe you would realize you still have a life that is worth living. Sasuke wrote quickly. Even the life you have now is better than no life at all. Don't give up. You'll find someone that doesn't care about the demon that is housed within you. You are the one that hasn't given life a chance. And yes, wanting to take your own life because you can't see beyond your current circumstances is exactly what I call a coward. Naruto sighed, and looked down at the floor. He couldn't make Sasuke understand how he was feeling, which meant his plan would probably have to wait until another day. Naruto scowled at that thought. He didn't want to adjust to living life this way, but it looked like he would be doing just that for a little while at least. "You can go away now," Naruto said, pushing himself to his feet. "I'm not going to do anything anymore." The "at least right now" didn't need to be said, but it was clearly thought by both of the boys. Naruto walked past Sasuke without looking at him. He didn't want Sasuke to see the truth in his eyes, see how scared Naruto truly was. Naruto knew that he wouldn't be able to protect himself from the attacks that were sure to come once the villagers found out about his disabilities, not to mention what the council would want done with him once they found out, and Naruto knew they would find out. They always did when it came to his injuries. He wouldn't be surprised if they thought this was a good reason to execute him, even thought that wouldn't be fair to him, he could them suggesting it. He couldn't let Sasuke know that because Sasuke didn't know the total depth of what it meant to be housing the nine-tailed demon. He didn't know his life was pretty much ruled by the council and any day could be his last. It wasn't fair, but Naruto had lived with this understanding ever since he had learned about the nine tails. Entering his room, Naruto made his way over to his bed and lay back down, closing his eyes and dreaming of the time that he could be free from his pain. Why couldn't his teammates for once try to understand how he felt? It was easy, of course, to call him a coward when they didn't have to walk in his footsteps. Naruto just wanted some peace. Was that too much to ask for? He didn't think so, but apparently everyone else did. Why could everyone else live in peace and Naruto was not allowed to? He wondered about his parents for the millionth time. Would they think he was a coward for what he was planning on doing? Surely, they would at least understand where he was coming from. If they had known about nine tails being sealed in him, then surely they knew about the pain it would cause him, the hate that everyone would feel towards him. Taking a deep breath, Naruto tried to forget about his troubled thoughts. They wouldn't do him any good right now. He needed all the time he could get so that he could plan. Because one way or the other he would leave his miserable existence behind. Whether or not his teammates wanted him to, because really, they didn't care. Sakura only cared about Sasuke and Sasuke only cared about revenge. Even his sensei only cared about his dirty books. Naruto often wondered if there was anything else his teacher cared for, but after all the times he had caught Kakashi reading his book, he didn't think so. What would it be like to have someone that truly cared about him? Naruto wondered to have someone to worry about him when he was gone on a mission, to worry that something happened to him when he came home late. Naruto didn't think he would ever know now. His disability had ruined things for him, and he couldn't even explain it to people so that they could understand. Why me? Naruto asked out loud. Why was I chosen to carry this burden? Did you want everyone to hate me and despise me for something that wasn't my fault? Did you hate me so much that you wanted me to suffer my entire life? Tears formed in Naruto's eyes. He couldn't understand why he was chosen for this. It wasn't fair. He honestly didn't believe that he could handle it for much longer. He didn't know what would happen if he killed himself. Would the nine tails be released? He hoped not. He just wanted to release himself from his pain and suffering. Slowly, Naruto drifted off to sleep, his tears drying on his face. And unknown to him, Sasuke was standing the doorway watching him silently. Leaving the Uchiha feeling confused, he knew that Naruto hurt deep down, and he refused to allow his teammates and teacher to see it. He just wasn't aware of him thinking that someone wanted him to suffer for his entire life. If Naruto truly felt that way, then shouldn't they allow him an exit from his pain? Sasuke didn't know, and he didn't like the feeling that was in his heart. The hurt and confusion Sasuke felt only served to make Sasuke angry. He didn't want to feel this way about his teammates. He wanted to get revenge on Itachi, and that was it. Yet, knowing that Naruto was hurting so much that he wanted to kill himself to free himself from the pain he felt, hurt Sasuke deeply, and he wasn't sure what to do about it. Kakashi needed to know about it to be certain, because Sasuke didn't believe for a minute that Naruto wasn't going to be so easily dissuaded. Sighing, Sasuke waited until Naruto was completely asleep before he exited the room, and went to wait for Kakashi. He hoped the man hurried up. He wanted to get in some extra training hours, not babysit all night. Still, Sasuke couldn't keep the worry for Naruto's mental health out of his head. He had always projected that he didn't like anyone, but that's not true. He just didn't want to show his worry because Itachi would hurt those he cared about. 30 minutes later, Kakashi entered the apartment building, with his favorite book in hand. He had had a meeting with the Hokage about Naruto's safety. Naruto would be staying with him for the time being, and unless it was a completely dangerous mission, Naruto would be going with him on all Team 7 missions. Kakashi didn't want to think about what could happen if he left Naruto alone for even a brief time. The thought scared Kakashi about what could happen to his sensei's son. It didn't bear thinking about because Kakashi was bound and determined that nothing would happen. What took so long? Sasuke demanded as soon as Kakashi had walked through the door, surprising the team leader. Kakashi had known Sasuke didn't want to help with Naruto, but Kakashi was determined Sasuke was going to gain a healthy respect for his teammate. Naruto could show Sasuke the true meaning of suffering and maybe help the boy let go of his long-seated need for revenge. I was discussing Naruto's situation with the Hokage, Kakashi answered, setting his book down when he saw the dark look in Sasuke's eyes. He knew then that something had happened and not necessarily for the good. What happened? Kakashi asked, wondering if he truly wanted to know. Naruto is determined to kill himself, that's what, Sasuke replied and explained the situation that had occurred in Kakashi's room. Sounds like we are going to have to keep a closer eye on him then, Kakashi murmured, looking at Sasuke as an idea formed. He didn't care for having a ton of people in his space, but maybe just maybe, Sasuke could help with Naruto full-time and move in with Kakashi as well. It would be easier for Kakashi to keep an eye on the boy. I don't know what you're thinking, but I don't like it, Sasuke said when he caught the gleam in Kakashi's eye. You probably won't like it, Kakashi agreed, but it needs to be done. Naruto needs someone to be here with him when I can't be. How would you like to move in and help me? Over my dead body? Sasuke glared daggers. I have my own life to live, I don't want to help Naruto. Too bad, Kakashi said, because I have already spoken with the Hokage and he thinks it would be a good idea. He can't make me do it, Sasuke growled, wishing he had never agreed to help Kakashi in the first place. Yes, he can if you want to continue being a ninja, Kakashi said, knowing he had won the battle with that one point. I am going to hate you forever for this, Sasuke said, scowling at Kakashi. Probably, but you just might thank me in the end, Kakashi said. Sasuke glared and shook his head before muttering. I wouldn't count on it. You might think that now, but you never know, Naruto might be your best friend in the entire world. Kakashi mentioned, I don't want a best friend, I don't want any friends, and you know this and you also know why. Sasuke said, I don't believe that for a minute, Kakashi replied. Itachi wants you to be alone with no friends so that it will be easier to play with your mind. Making friends will change that, make it harder for Itachi to mess with you. What makes you think that I want to be friends with Naruto? He's an idiot. Sasuke said, looking away from Kakashi. He didn't want to admit he felt a bond with the blonde because Naruto also knew what it meant to be lonely, he just went about getting attention the wrong way. Because you know exactly how it feels to long for friendship, except that was something you were never denied. Kakashi said, you've watched him get denied everything that is important to his survival. You won't admit it, but it hurts you to have watched him go through that for years. You have wondered how he was strong enough to deal with everyone's hatred and still be the bright boy that he is. Kakashi said, knowing that he had hit the nail on the head with his last remark. It's hard watching the dumb suffer, Sasuke said. He's not the only one who has a disability. I don't see every single person wanting to off themselves because of it. Not everyone has had to deal with the level of hatred that Naruto has either. Kakashi pointed out, his situation is worse than anyone else because of the abuse that he's suffered for years at the hands of this village. It's still taking the coward's way out, Sasuke said, and wanting to continue this conversation anymore. He didn't want Naruto to die, but at the same time he didn't want to have to be the one to deal with Naruto's mess. Maybe if you could live a week in his shoes you would understand why he feels the way he does. Until you have a little understanding, I don't think you will know what it means to be a true friend, Kakashi said thoughtfully. I don't want to live in anyone's shoes but mine. Sasuke said, Naruto wouldn't last a day in mine. He would have no idea how to deal with the expectations that came with being part of a clan. Perhaps not, he's always been a troublemaker for attention and because he was part of a normal family. Kakashi said, I am hoping that we can give him that, and maybe he won't be so depressed and we can help him get through it. I don't know, Sasuke said, he sounded like had no hope of ever getting better. I don't know if there is any help for that. There is always hope, Kakashi said, we just have to remind him of that. I'm still not crazy about being here, but if you are going to make me, then what choice do I have? Sasuke muttered, as he turned and headed back to the couch. He would find a way out of this mess if it was the last thing he done. And then he would pay Itachi back for what he had done to the Uchiha clan. Naruto woke up to a bad feeling that something was going to happen. He didn't understand it and he couldn't explain it, but he knew something was going to happen. Whether or not it would be good or bad was still to be determined. He lay there for what felt like hours, but must have only been minutes. Naruto wondered if Sasuke had left yet. He wanted to get on with his plans, but if he wasn't alone there would be no way that his plans would work. He kind of felt sorry for whoever found him, because regardless of who the person was it wouldn't be easy finding a dead person. Naruto could finally smile at the sense of peace he felt. He almost felt giddy that his plans would soon come to fruition. He wouldn't have to adjust to no longer being a ninja. He wouldn't have to suffer needlessly at the hands of the adults who were supposed to be helping him. Naruto would be free and he wouldn't ever have to worry about being beaten for no reason. His past life would be just that, no more and in the past. Naruto hated to disappoint Iruka, but surely his former teacher would understand the way he felt? After all, Iruka had had to watch what the other people had done to Naruto for years. Sensing a presence behind his closed door, Naruto turned his head to watch it open. Kakashi entered the room seconds later. Naruto frowns when he sees the serious look on Kakashi's face. Briefly wondering if Sasuke had told Kakashi about what he had tried to do earlier. Naruto didn't see why Sasuke could be bothered considering, but knowing the Uchiha because the boy hated Naruto, he would have done it despite Naruto. I am guessing Sasuke told you about the earlier incident? Naruto asked coldly, anger filling him at the sight of the older man. Kakashi nodded before holding up a scroll for Naruto to look at. We need to discuss the reason why you felt the need to attempt that. Naruto rolled his eyes. He didn't expect his teacher to understand. After all, Kakashi didn't have to live with his disabilities. Don't ignore me, Kakashi wrote quickly. I want to help you, but I can't if you don't help me understand what is going through your mind right now. I'm pissed right now, Naruto hissed at him. I feel nothing but anger at everyone around me. They didn't cause this, but they didn't help me escape it either. I don't want to be a burden on you or the rest of Team 7, and that's exactly what I am going to become. There is no way I can continue being a ninja, and I know the Hokage won't allow me to live alone. I don't want to live because I am tired of being treated like a disease. You are not a disease. And it's normal to be angry in your situation. Anyone else would be too. You can't turn your back on those that care about you. What do you think killing yourself would accomplish, other than hurting those that care about you? Kakashi wrote. Naruto read quickly and snorted before letting out a bitter-sounding laugh. Who cares about me? Naruto barked. Iruka? He's the only one I can think of. And as far as accomplishing anything, I would be free from my miserable life. In case you haven't noticed, all I have done in my life is suffer. My caregivers haven't ever cared about giving me any care. Just because they were bad, it doesn't make everyone bad, Kakashi pointed out. I know that hasn't been your experience, but I promise there is still good in this world if you just look for it. Besides, it's not like you are going to be alone anymore. Iruka and I will be there for you, and so will Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto looked at Kakashi and laughed. Kakashi frowned at him. This wasn't going well at all, and it was proving Sasuke's point. Naruto had been depressed for longer than any of them could have guessed. It wasn't fair to Naruto that they hadn't noticed either. They had all gone on their business every day without taking notice of their teammate that was suffering. If anything happened to Naruto from here on out, Kakashi would blame himself. After all, he had known that Naruto would try something, so he had to be extra vigilant to keep that from happening. Sasuke and Sakura are too busy caring about themselves to even give a shit about me, Naruto said before turning away from Kakashi, signaling the end of the conversation. It didn't matter what Kakashi said, Naruto's mind was made up. Good luck to anyone who wanted to stop him. Naruto would just disappear and go where no one would think to look. They weren't going to stop him. He wanted to be free, and this was the only way he could think to do it. To anyone who didn't like it, Iruka would eventually be okay with Naruto's decision. He had to be. Iruka was the only person who truly understood how Naruto felt, so he would have to know how miserable that Naruto was. Naruto wasn't strong enough to hide it anymore. He was looking forward to an eternity of peace. Kakashi looked at Naruto, who had completely turned his back to him and was now ignoring him. Kakashi felt bad for Naruto and completely understood why he wanted to take the actions that he did, but as Naruto's teacher he could not allow it. Kakashi knew that Naruto felt useless next to his two teammates. He needed a plan to show Naruto that he was not useless, that he could still help his teammates out, and there was still good in the world. Sasuke was going to help in one way or the other, because he needed to see that the world didn't revolve around revenge. So maybe he get two birds with one stone, but it had to be one heck of a plan, because the Uchiha would not be fooled. After looking back at Naruto, Kakashi sighed and turned and exited the room, leaving the door open. He didn't think that Naruto would try to do anything tonight, but one could never be sure. Entering his room, Kakashi sat down on the edge of his bed. Instead of picking his book back up, he stared out the window, his mind busy plotting for the two unknowing boys that were currently in residence. A couple of hours later, Sasuke, tired of sitting on the couch, decided if Kakashi was going to expect him to move in with him, then he was going to get at least one more night at the Uchiha residence. He had the feeling that Kakashi wanted him to lay his ghosts to rest, but Sasuke was determined that that wasn't going to happen until he'd gotten revenge on his brother. Silently, Sasuke slipping out the door, sliding it quietly back into place behind him. If he was lucky, Kakashi wouldn't even know that he had left. Then again, Sasuke knew that Kakashi probably already knew that he was leaving. The man was an extremely intelligent Junin, of course. One couldn't expect a genin to fool a Junin, but still Sasuke had to get out of that stifling atmosphere. Making his way down the street, Sasuke headed for where his parents were buried. Naruto's plans for the evening had brought his parents to mind, and Sasuke knew he wouldn't get them off his mind without visiting them first. Reaching their graves, Sasuke stared down at them, wondering what his life would have been like had his parents still been alive. Would he have made it into Anbu like Itachi, or would he have his own genin team? One thing was certain, Sasuke didn't think he'd have been the same moody teen he was now. He would have been happier despite the pressure that was being applied to him. Would his father have approved of him? Would he have been just as talented as Itachi? Or would he have been like Naruto and be the dead last in his family? He didn't think he would have been the dead last, he worked far too hard for that. Father, would you approve of me now? Sasuke wondered out loud. I was in a fight the other day, and a teammate stopped to help me out. I left to go get help and he was badly injured. Now he can't be a ninja anymore, and I wonder if he blames me for it. Sasuke didn't like admitting it out loud, but he felt quite guilty for what had happened to Naruto. He knew that they both probably would have been killed if he hadn't gone for help. But if he had stayed, would Naruto still be a ninja? Sasuke didn't like feeling like this. It made him feel like a failure, and that was something that Sasuke was not. Father, I don't know that I made the right choice. The choice I made took my teammate's career away. I shouldn't care about that, but I do. The only thing I should care about is killing Itachi for what he done to you and mother and our clan. Sasuke paused. This attack of conscience was really bothering him. He didn't have anything to feel guilty about, but he still felt guilty. I don't think I made the wrong choice, but I think Naruto will probably blame me for what happened. Maybe if he had stayed out of it, none of this would have happened. Then where would that have left you? Kakashi asked from behind him. He had known Sasuke would try to sneak out, and he had the feeling that he would find him at his parents' graves. The kid spent too much time living in the past and not enough time living in the present. I would be happier and not living with guilt, Sasuke answered without looking up from his parents' graves. I don't like feeling guilty, but I do. I feel like it's my fault that Naruto ended up the way he did. You didn't know the sound Nin would use you to draw Naruto out, Kakashi pointed out. You done the only thing you could have for your teammate. Yeah, I abandoned him, Sasuke muttered. Isn't there something in the rulebooks about doing that? Shouldn't I lose my headband for that? No, Kakashi muttered. Now, if you were the one that told the sound about 9 tails, that would be another story, but since you didn't know about the demon, you couldn't have shared that secret. The person that did share it is going to be in a lot of trouble. They will be lucky if they don't get executed for it. Do you think that person is planning on attacking Naruto again? They went through all that trouble to hurt him, you would think that they wanted him dead. Sasuke said quietly. Maybe, Kakashi said, but probably not anytime soon, because Naruto wouldn't dare go anywhere alone right now, not with things the way they are. I wouldn't be so sure of that, Sasuke said thoughtfully. He seemed pretty determined that he was going to end his life earlier. You have to think about the things he has been through to understand why he feels the way he does. Kakashi said, he's never had anyone to honestly and truly care for him. He more than anything else in this world just wants to be loved. Everyone wants that, so does he. But the world is determined that he is not going to have any of that. Everyone deserves to know that someone cares for them, Sasuke muttered, wondering how Kakashi had gotten his mind off of revenge yet again. That seemed to be happening more often these last couple of days. Sasuke didn't want to spend all his time focusing on Naruto, but given the blonde's current frame of mind, somebody needed to focus on it. Otherwise they would be looking for another team member for Team 7. "What are you doing out here anyways?" Sasuke asked. "Don't you need to be babysitting Naruto? Why when I can have you do it?" Kakashi asked, and Sasuke met Kakashi's eye scowling. "He was asleep when I left to come get you. You need to stay with me for the time being." "You left him alone?" Sasuke asked, ignoring the part about moving in with Kakashi. "I wouldn't have put it past Naruto to pretend to be sleeping just to get you to go away." Kakashi shrugged. He had had a feeling that Naruto would try that, but surely he wouldn't try anything when he went to fetch Sasuke. Of course, that could be an error in his thinking too, because Naruto had already proved he was tired of life in general. "Maybe you should leave me alone and go check on him. After all, his mental status is still completely unknown," Sasuke suggested, wishing he could be alone once more. He just wanted some time to remember his family without being bugged. Obviously that was too much to ask because Kakashi was standing here bugging him. "No chance, because your mental status is in question also," Kakashi replied cheerfully, causing Sasuke to scowl at him. "I'm not the one in danger of killing myself." Sasuke glared at him. "I don't want or need your help. But you will get it nonetheless," Kakashi said, "and the fact that you feel guilty over what happened to Naruto, that tells me you are still feeling things quite deeply, and that tells me that there is hope for you yet." Sasuke scowled harder and refused to face Kakashi. Just because he felt guilty about what happened, it didn't make him Naruto's best friend in the entire world. He wanted to say that he didn't care about what happened to Naruto, but that wasn't true. He didn't want the kid to die, he just wanted to be left to his own thoughts and plans. From the way Kakashi was talking, that probably wasn't going to happen anytime soon. "I thought you didn't want Naruto to die," Sasuke mentioned quietly, and Kakashi looked at him through narrow eyes. "I don't," he replied, still staring at him. "Then why are you wasting time on me when he could be doing himself in right now for all you know? Or somebody could be helping him into the next life. What do you know about that you're not saying?" Kakashi asked. "Did someone mention a plan to go after Naruto after all this has happened?" "No," Sasuke answered, "but it wouldn't really surprise me considering you left him alone. You said it yourself, the people in this village don't like him. Of course, they would try to get rid of him, if they knew that he was deaf and partially blind. And all it would take is someone with loose lips from the hospital, like that doctor. Tell the wrong person and Naruto is in trouble." "You have a point," Kakashi said thoughtfully before frowning and turning to look in the direction of his apartment. As soon as Sasuke had made his point, a strange feeling had overcome Kakashi, almost as if he sensed that Naruto was in extreme danger. "I think we have to go. Something doesn't feel right." "You're right, it doesn't," Sasuke said, frowning and following Kakashi's gaze. He wondered if someone was brave enough to break into Kakashi's home to get to Naruto, or maybe Naruto had done something to himself. Sasuke didn't know, but he didn't think they needed to waste another minute, when it was clear that they both felt that Naruto was in danger. Without saying anything, both Kakashi and Sasuke turned and dashed towards Kakashi's apartment, both wondering if they would get there in time. Kakashi refused to let his student be hurt on his watch yet again. If he had to chain Naruto to his back, that is exactly what he would do it. He would not disappoint his sensei by allowing Naruto to be hurt by the village yet again. Of course, the feeling he had didn't necessarily mean that Naruto was in danger from a villager, it could be anybody. Naruto had drifted off to sleep when an uneasy feeling woke him. It was much like the feeling he'd had earlier, one that gave him warning of something to come. Naruto knew instinctively that whatever it was, wasn't good. Blinking his good eye, Naruto strained his senses trying to get a handle on what was going on. With the loss of his hearing and the sight in one eye rendered useless, Naruto's abilities to sense chakra increased tenfold. And he could feel enemy chakra slowly approaching his bedroom window. Unsure of what to do, and knowing that Kakashi had hidden his weapons after his little adventure earlier, Naruto wondered how he'd be able to defend himself. Getting out of bed, Naruto slowly made his way to the bedroom door, The chakra was coming from outside his window, so maybe if he could make it out the door, he could find someone to help him. With a bit of luck and without running into anything, Naruto exited his bedroom and headed straight for the front door, only for the door to be slammed open, knocking Naruto off his feet. Naruto stared into the cold, angry eyes of an enemy ninja. From what Naruto could tell, they were also from the Sound Village. "What do you want with me?" Naruto cried out, as the first ninja sent his foot flying into Naruto's sore ribs. Naruto cried out, wondering where Kakashi was when Naruto needed him. Wasn't this the reason he was staying with Kakashi to begin with, so that the older man could provide protection? What good it was doing him right now? All of a sudden Naruto was yanked to his feet and sent crashing through Kakashi's front window. Naruto cried out as he felt the glass piercing his skin in several places. When was this torture going to end? Would he ever be truly free from his pain? Landing harshly on the sidewalk, Naruto gasped for the air that had been forced from his body when he landed. Forcing himself to roll over on his back, Naruto stared up at the clear midnight sky, trying to recover his breath and encourage himself to get up. If he didn't, he would be faced with getting put back in the hospital again, and he couldn't afford that. He didn't want to be around people who only acted like they wanted to help him. Once he had gotten his air back, Naruto forced himself back to his feet, and concentrated on the area where the chakra was. For whatever reason, the chakra was still in Kakashi's home. It was almost as if they were looking for something Kakashi had, and Naruto had just gotten in the way. Hoping that that was all there was to it, Naruto took off running towards Iruka's apartment. He knew his former teacher would be home, probably in bed. But Iruka claimed that he wanted Naruto to come to him when something like this happened, so Naruto was going to take him up on it. Hopefully those sound nin found what they were looking for and would leave him alone. Unexpectedly, Naruto was tackled from behind and slammed to the ground, a hand roughly shoving onto his back and going straight to his throat. "Where is Kakashi?" the man demanded, clearly not knowing that Naruto couldn't hear nor understand what he was saying. "Where he is?" the man demanded impatiently, his grip slowly growing tighter around Naruto's throat. He didn't have time for this. He needed to know where Kakashi was so that he could know if they had time to plant the evidence of betrayal in the apartment. Naruto opened his mouth but no sound came out. He was scared and he wasn't sure what this guy wanted. When Naruto didn't answer his demand, the nin took his other fist and slammed it into Naruto's good eye. Naruto cried out, and knew that he wouldn't be seen out of that eye for some time. "Leave me alone," Naruto cried, and the nin that beside him laughed. "So you are not dumb after all. You do understand what I am asking you." Still Naruto didn't reply, forcing the angry nin to place both hands around Naruto's throat and begin to squeeze, slowly stealing the breath from Naruto's lungs. If this kid wasn't going to give him the answers that he needed, then there was no reason for the kid to live. All of a sudden the nin's hands were ripped away from the unconscious Naruto's throat and the nin found himself thrown against the wall. "What did you do to him?" an angry Iruka demanded the sound nin. He might not have been very experienced at battle, but he was willing to do whatever it took to protect those he loved. And Naruto was one of those people. "My business with the kid is none of your concern," the sound nin sneered, mistakenly thinking that Iruka wouldn't do anything. Iruka slammed him back against the wall as hard as he could. "That boy is like a little brother to me, and as a big brother, I will do whatever it takes to protect him." Iruka growled, "So whatever businesses you like to say with him is my concern, especially when it looks like you were doing your level best to murder him. That stupid kid is just a job," the nin wheezed, glaring at Iruka. "He is stupid and wouldn't make a good ninja. He couldn't even see me coming. Because you came up behind him, and besides that he is partially blind, so yes, he probably did have a hard time seeing you." Iruka glared, his anger growing more and more apparent. He couldn't stand when Naruto had days like these. It always hurt the older man to see Naruto being abused in any way. "Naruto is not stupid, he's an extremely intelligent young man," Iruka muttered, relieved when the police had arrived to take the nin away. Once the nin was gone, Iruka kneeled down beside Naruto, wiping away the blood that flowed from a wound in his head. The sight of him made Iruka want to cry. This couldn't keep happening to Naruto, or the boy would completely lose his faith in humanity. "I'm sorry, I wasn't there," Iruka cried softly as tears filled his eyes. Why wasn't Kakashi with Naruto anyways? Why was this boy alone yet again when he had been attacked? Was anyone going to actually do their job and protect him like they claimed they would? Sensing chakra behind him, Iruka gathered an unconscious Naruto into his arms, and turned to face Kakashi and Sasuke. He was attacked again, Iruka said, glaring at the guilty-looking Junin and the equally guilty-looking Genin. Where were you when he needed you? You promised you would protect him, instead he is still getting hurt on your watch. We're very lucky he trusts anybody at this point, but if this continues to happen I don't know that he will trust anyone ever again. Turning his back to the silent duo, Iruka started making his way towards the hospital, wondering if that was his best choice, since the last doctor Naruto had seen had tried to murder him. Looking down at the boy in his arms, Iruka wondered if he could get by with just taking him to his apartment. Iruka didn't want anyone else to take a shot at Naruto for no reason. And right now he was too angry with Kakashi to even allow Naruto to go back to him. Kakashi had promised he would take care of Naruto, but he failed, and that made Iruka extremely angry. If you cared about someone, you didn't let them get hurt. Maybe Naruto was better off with Naruto after all? Iruka couldn't do much in the way of protecting him, but he would be home more often than Kakashi was. Surely, that would count for something. Naruto coughed, sending blood covering the front of Iruka's vest. Frowning, Iruka noticed for the first time Naruto's struggle to breath, that sealed whether Iruka was going to take him to the hospital or not. If Naruto had an injury to his lungs, Iruka had no choice because that wasn't something that he could help. Hang on, Naruto, Iruka murmured as he turned and headed towards the hospital. He could feel both Sasuke and Kakashi behind him. He knew they were concerned, but that didn't mean that Iruka wasn't angry with both of them. They were supposed to keep Naruto out of harm, for crying out loud. It only took Iruka a few minutes to reach the hospital, Naruto coughing up blood and struggling to breathe the whole time. Iruka was worried. He didn't think the nin that had been beating on Naruto had done that much damage in such a short time. Apparently, that wasn't the case, and Naruto was badly injured again, once again making Iruka feel bad for everything that had ever happened to the 13-year-old. When was something good going to come out of life for the kid? He couldn't keep going the way he was. His depression would really set in then, and Iruka feared for the kid's life even more. One could only suffer for so long before they gave up. Iruka didn't ever want to see that day come for Naruto, but he feared it was fast approaching. Unless Iruka or someone else could stop it. Once at the hospital, Naruto was rushed straight back to the without much warning to Iruka. He could only pray that they didn't intend to hurt him. Sitting in the waiting room, Iruka stared at the floor, pondering what his next decision should be. He wondered if staying in the village was the right thing for Naruto to do, considering how much everyone hated him. If he was Naruto, he would have considered leaving a long time ago. He didn't know how Naruto managed to still care about the village, when no one ever gave him a chance. It made Iruka's heart ache thinking about it. Naruto was a sweet child, even if he was rambunctious at times. All he wanted was to be loved and treated like everyone else. That wasn't a crime, after all. Everyone needed love. Have you heard anything? Kakashi asked, interrupting Iruka's thoughts. Iruka scowled at him before replying. Why do you care? You left him alone. I wouldn't be surprised if you had done it on purpose. I had someone I thought I could trust from my Anbu days watching him, or supposedly watching. Kakashi said, I had to go after Sasuke. The Hokage also wants him to move in with me for the time being. He thinks that Sasuke can reach Naruto when no one else can. What are you talking about? Iruka asked, feeling confused. Naruto is very depressed, in case you hadn't noticed. Kakashi stated bluntly. In fact, he tried to kill himself tonight, before all of this happened. Naruto wouldn't try to do that yet. He hasn't given up hope of having a good life. You're an idiot if you think that, Sasuke said. I took the shuriken away from him myself, and later I overheard him talking to himself. He doesn't want to live. Doesn't want to adjust to living with disabilities. Then his depression is so much worse than we thought. Iruka said, his heart feeling like it was breaking. He would do anything possible to change this situation for Naruto, but he wasn't sure how. The only thing he knew he could do was show Naruto how much he was loved. I would say that it is yes, Kakashi said. We are going to have to keep a closer eye on him for the time being. He's not going to like that, Sasuke muttered, turning away to stare out the window. At least he will live, Kakashi remarked, making Iruka turn and glare at him. I can't believe you just said that. It's the truth and you know it. Naruto needs to know that he is loved and needed. Sakura and Sasuke are going to help with that. Kakashi said. If Sakura is involved, leave me out of it. Sasuke said, glaring at Kakashi. Then you wouldn't get any teamwork experience out of it. Kakashi said as he sat down beside Iruka. I really didn't intend to leave Naruto alone tonight. I didn't expect Sasuke to sneak out at the first opportunity. Yes, well, Naruto is hurt again because no one is thinking of his health. Iruka said, all of the beatings are bound to start affecting his mental health. I fear for his life when that happens. You should fear for his life now. Sasuke pointed out, he doesn't want to accept being disabled. He thinks everyone is going to abandon him for dead. I would never do that, Iruka said sadly. I know too well what it means to be alone and feel like no one cares about you. The memories of the years after he lost his parents would never be forgotten. Some said he had the perfect excuse for hating Naruto. After all, Naruto housed the thing that had caused his parents' death. What they didn't understand was that Iruka couldn't blame Naruto. Naruto had been a baby and wasn't responsible for the demon's actions. Iruka wished people could understand that, and leave Naruto in peace. But he supposed as long as hate existed in the world, then someone somewhere would find a reason to hate Naruto. Even if that reason was illogical. An hour later, a doctor exited the emergency room doors and headed their way. How is he? Iruka asked as soon as the doctor got within hearing distance. He's going to be okay, he just got out of surgery. Naruto already injured ribs were re-broken, and this time a piece of the rib punctured his lung, causing it to collapse. Along with that, he had a bad case of internal bleeding which has also been fixed. Naruto is going to be weak for a little while due to blood loss, so it wouldn't be ideal to leave him by himself for a little while. I never intend on leaving him alone for as long as he lives. A relieved Iruka replied. He had worried that something would go wrong and they would lose him. That had always been his biggest fear, that Naruto would die young and not experience life in the fullest. He wasn't sure how, but Iruka was determined he was going to help Naruto get through his depression and show him that life was still worth living. Even if he was disabled, Naruto was going to learn he could still mean something to someone, even if he wasn't a ninja. Not everyone cared whether or not he was the Hokage. Naruto meant something to him, and Iruka was going to show him every single day, if it took the rest of his life. He wouldn't allow Naruto to take his own life. He might get tired of you, if you never leave him alone. Kakashi chuckled. You said it yourself, he doesn't need to be alone right now. Iruka pointed out, and Kakashi shook his head. He knew what Naruto meant to Iruka. He couldn't but feel guilty for not being there for his student when said student needed him. How long will he have to be in the hospital? Iruka asked. He didn't want to be here any longer than needed. Depends on how fast his lung heals. The doctor replied. You don't want to take him home, for him to fall and have the rib re-puncture the lung. Naruto could die if the lung collapses again. Iruka's face went white at the image the doctor painted. He guessed Naruto was better off where he was for the time being. Can we see him? Iruka asked after a moment's silence, and the doctor nodded. He is still out from the surgery, but it can't hurt to let you sit with him. The doctor replied. A few minutes later, Iruka and Kakashi and Sasuke were crowded by Naruto's bedside. Naruto was unconscious and had small shallow cuts on his face from where he had been thrown through the window. Kakashi winced at the bruises that littered his arms. Someone really hadn't liked him. When will he wake up? Iruka asked the nurse who was checking Naruto's vital stats. Anytime now, she replied. Just remember, don't get him riled up because he needs his rest so that his lung can heal. A few hours later, and Naruto was beginning to wake up. He frowned when he saw the worried faces around him. He was tired and sore, and he couldn't remember exactly what had happened to put him here. He let out a sigh, and closed his eyes again, drifting back to sleep. He didn't want to be awake, it hurt too much. He still didn't want to accept his life with disabilities. He wondered if there was a way that he couldn't leave the hospital again. He hated to be a disappointment to Iruka, but he was so tired. A couple days later showed no improvement on Naruto's part, leaving Iruka and Kakashi worried that he might have been given more poison. When they suggested this to the doctor replied in the negative. We checked for any foreign substances in his bloodstream when he was brought in. We know about what happened last time he was here, and we wanted to make sure we didn't allow it to get so far along. Nothing was found. Sometimes the will to live is what makes a difference. You said Naruto was battling depression because of his recent diagnosis? Iruka nodded. Then his will to live isn't very strong right now. the doctor said, as he gently checked Naruto over. What's that mean? Iruka asked, knowing that he wasn't going to like the answer. Naruto isn't improving because he doesn't want to improve. He wants to die, so unless you can somehow change his mind, he likely to wilt away. The doctor explained, hating the heartbroken expression in Iruka's eyes. He wished he had better news for them, but he didn't know how to make someone live when they did not want to. A few minutes later and Iruka was once more alone with Naruto. Iruka looked at his beloved student with tears in his eyes. How did he change Naruto's mind, when all Naruto had ever done was suffer? It wasn't fair to ask him to continue living a life that he hated. I know you can't hear me, Iruka said softly, reaching out and taking Naruto's hand in his own. I just want you to know that I understand why you feel like giving up. After all, no one has ever given you a real reason to fight. You've fought for your own survival long enough. It's hugely unfair of me to ask you to keep fighting, when I know how tired you are. Iruka paused to wipe a few tears away. His heart felt like it was breaking into 1,000 tiny pieces. I know I haven't always been there for you like I should have been. I wanted to say sorry, and I want to say that if you chose to fight again, that I will be there for you. So much people will think we are twins. I know that I am not enough for you to keep fighting. You need more than one person to care for you in this lifetime. I think it's unfair that you have never had that. I wish I could make people see what I see when I look at you. You're an extremely kind and intelligent person. You just hide behind your trouble-making ways because you have no other way of making people see who you are. Iruka sighed, wishing Naruto could hear just how much he cared for him. I'm sorry people don't see the lonely boy behind your mask of smiles. I would do anything in my power to change that for you. If I could, I would fight this battle for you, but sadly it's not one that I can fight. All I can do is stand beside you and cheer you on. You don't have to let your depression win, Naruto. I know you don't see it, but there are people who do care for you. Sasuke has been here just as much as Kakashi, and I think he also sees more than you think he does. He sees your loneliness because he has felt the same way, but he hid behind a mask of not caring so that people wouldn't see how much he hurt because of what happened with his family. I think that mask is finally starting to break, and it's because of what you have been through that is causing it. You don't see the change that you have caused, and it's a good change. Sasuke is on his way to being a different person because of you, Naruto. Tears streamed down Iruka's face. He couldn't stand the fact that Naruto was willingly giving up despite his willingness to fight. He wondered how he had allowed Naruto's depression to get so bad. He should be shot for allowing it to happen and not doing anything about it. I'm so damn sorry, Naruto, Iruka cried as he leaned forward and lay his head on Naruto's bed. I'm just like everyone else, choosing to ignore your pain because it's something I wasn't comfortable dealing with. I don't deserve for you to come back to me, not after everything that you have already been through. Tears clogged Iruka's throat. He didn't have the words that could bring Naruto out of his darkness. He wished that he did, but he did not. Iruka cried hard for the next several minutes. He felt like he was losing Naruto and he didn't know what to do. Feeling a hand on his shoulder, Iruka sat up and wiped at his eyes before looking up at Kakashi. What's going on? Kakashi asked, concerned about Iruka's breakdown. The doctor thinks that Naruto doesn't have the will to live, that's why he is not getting better. I don't know how to encourage him, because frankly, Naruto has been hurt far too much for one of his age. If he doesn't want to get better, then maybe it would be better to just let him go. No, it's not a good idea to just let him go, Kakashi said. We can see him through this, I know we can. We just have to find him a reason to keep fighting. Why, so he can be beaten again? Iruka asked bitterly. He didn't want Naruto to be in any more pain than he was already in. We can protect him, Kakashi said. We can do better than we done before. I refuse to allow this to happen to him again. We will find him a reason to keep fighting. Maybe you should go home and get some rest. You've been here all day. You are bound to be exhausted. Fine, Iruka muttered. He was exhausted, but he didn't want to leave Naruto alone. I'll stay with him. Sasuke spoke from the doorway. Iruka nodded and stood and followed Kakashi out the door. I'll be back, Kakashi told him. I'm just going to make sure Iruka gets home all right. Sasuke nodded and approached Naruto's bed. Sasuke sat down in the chair beside the bed, watching Naruto's chest rise and fall steadily. He had heard what Iruka had said about Naruto not having the will to live. He couldn't remember a time when Naruto had seemed hopeless. He remembered their academy days, and how the kid had acted happy all the time. Was our academy days just an act? Were you ever really happy? Sasuke wondered, raising his eyes to look at Naruto's face. Have you always been so depressed you didn't care about how anyone else felt? Do you know what it would do to Iruka to have you kill yourself? The man would never be the same again. He loves you, and if that's not reason enough to fight, I don't know what is. Sasuke paused, wishing that Naruto could hear the words coming from his mouth. He wished he had another way of encouraging Naruto to live. I know I called you a coward when you attempted to take your life the first time. While I don't agree with your method, if you have suffered as much as I have heard, then maybe it would be okay for you to be free from your pain. I don't you have ever experienced true joy and the love of a family. I'm sorry that you were never given that chance. As he sat there, Sasuke remembered the good times he'd had with his family. The times he had spent with Itachi training, up until Itachi had become Anbu, of course. There were the times his father had spent with him, teaching him their clan's jutsu. Sasuke had hated it at the time, because he hadn't felt like he was ever going to be good enough for the family, but eventually he had learned the jutsus and had excelled at them. Naruto had never had any of that growing up. He had never known the love of a family, the joy of loving someone and being loved in return. Sasuke believed he understood now why Naruto was so depressed, and it wasn't just because of the disabilities. Those sucked, but a big part of it was watching everyone and their families and knowing that he would never be a part of that. Naruto had felt like he had been set apart from everyone else, and while that was true, it didn't make him any less deserving of friends or love. If you can just find a little bit of will to live, Sasuke murmured, I will be the family that you never had. So will Kakashi and Iruka and even Sakura. We will help you become accustomed to your new way of life. You won't be alone anymore. I will be the brother you have never had, and if I can figure out a way, I will help you continue your dream to become Hokage. You don't have to give up on your dreams so soon. Just please, whatever you do, find some way to keep fighting. This village needs more people like you that are willing to fight for what they believe in, even when no one believes in them. Sasuke sat beside Naruto's bed, unsure of what else to say, knowing that Naruto couldn't hear him, and probably wouldn't listen even if he could hear him. Sighing, Sasuke thought back to their days in the academy. He had always acted like he was too good to be Naruto's friend, that Naruto's antics had always gotten on his nerves. That much was true. He thought Naruto acted like an idiot, never knowing that Naruto had been acting out of loneliness. Sasuke had known, of course, that Naruto was an orphan, like him, but it had made Sasuke feel better by acting like Naruto's pain was of no consequence to him. Of course, ever since Naruto had been beaten so badly that he had been left disabled, something inside of Sasuke had slowly been changing. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he didn't want the kid to hurt anymore, after hearing everything Naruto had been through. Sasuke could admit to himself that it hurt that Sasuke hadn't even helped the Naruto situation when he was younger. Naruto probably thought that Sasuke hated him. Of course, that wasn't true, but it was safer for Naruto to think so, even if Sasuke didn't like it. Turning to look out the window, Sasuke wondered if it would be possible for Naruto to find the strength to get through this situation. He wondered what he could use to encourage Naruto to fight. There had to be something. There had to be something or someone that Naruto loved more than life itself. Other than ramen, Sasuke thought darkly. He refused to buy that stuff and bring it to the hospital. Any change? Kakashi asked from the doorway, and Sasuke shook his head no. There has to be something that he loves that would encourage him to fight. Sasuke said, I just don't know what it is. At this point, I'm not sure it would do any good anyways. Kakashi said sadly, you can't encourage some to live if they don't want to. It wouldn't be right to just let him go without trying something though. Sasuke said, you wouldn't let any of your other teammates go without a fight. There is no difference with Naruto. You're right, Kakashi agreed, but none of them had ever gone through the years of abuse and suffering that Naruto has either. He is a completely different situation. There has to be something we haven't tried yet. Sasuke muttered as he heard footsteps behind him and Kakashi. Kakashi Hitaki, you are under arrest, for providing the information on the 9 Tails to the Sound Village. And you are also being charged with attempted murder on one Naruto Uzumaki. The Anbu droned out before placing Kakashi's hands in handcuffs. On what grounds? Kakashi demanded, wondering why this was happening now. On the grounds of the evidence that we found in your apartment. The Anbu replied, before shoving Kakashi out of the room, leaving a startled Sasuke behind. What evidence? Sasuke heard Kakashi yell from down the hall. There was no evidence that I gave any kind of information to the Sound Village. Why would I want to hurt one of my own students anyways? Could it be true? Sasuke muttered, when he leaves the village it's not always for a mission. He could have given that info to the Sound Village at any time. But why would he want Naruto hurt? The kid was harmless even if he was a threat to a person's ear. Still something didn't seem right. He didn't think that Kakashi could have given that information up and then been back to the village when the attack happened. Although that night Sasuke left and went to see his parents, Kakashi had left Naruto alone, knowing that the boy was suicidal. Sasuke wondered if the reason he had left was because he had known someone was coming for a visit and he didn't want to implicate himself. Surely, not Sasuke thought our own teacher wouldn't betray us in this way. He wouldn't betray his own village. What was going on? If Kakashi didn't do it, then who planted the evidence that Kakashi had betrayed Naruto? Too bad you are not awake, Naruto, Sasuke muttered. You are missing a whole lot of drama right now. They just arrested Kakashi for the attack on you. I don't think there is any way he done it. I can't think of a reason why he would do it. Sasuke frowned, wondering what on earth was going on. Who and why would someone frame their sensei? Unless it was to get unlimited access to Naruto, which at the moment wasn't even very hard to do. Still, it came down to someone wanting to harm his teammate. Sasuke groaned, feeling the beginnings of a headache. He had the feeling that Kakashi had been with him when the evidence had been planted, that he couldn't be totally certain, but it was the only time Sasuke could think of for anyone to plant false evidence. Sasuke wanted to make a visit to the Hokage's office to see what was going on with Kakashi, but he needed to stay with Naruto in case something happened and Sasuke could prevent it. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe his teacher had something to do with Naruto getting hurt. He hoped not, but one could never truly tell who their allies were. Sasuke had thought his brother could be trusted, and look how well that turned out. His brother was certifiably crazy. Looking at Naruto, he watched as Naruto slowly opened his eyes, surprising Sasuke. Was Naruto going to pull through after all? Naruto moaned and turned to see Sasuke sitting beside him. What had happened this time to land him in the hospital? Naruto felt like he had been run over by a train. It hurt to breathe when he drew in a breath. It felt like something was wrong with his lung. What happened? Naruto asked, wishing, not for the first time, that he could hear Sasuke's response. Looking around, Sasuke found a notepad and a pen sitting on the table beside the bed. Grabbing it, Sasuke quickly wrote down his answer before showing it to Naruto. You were attacked at Kakashi's apartment, then again when you left to get help. Naruto frowned. That explained why he felt so sore. Where is everyone? He asked, not really wanting to know the answer because it would confirm to him that no one truly cared about him. Iruka is at home resting. He has barely left your side since you were brought in. Kakashi was here until a few minutes ago when he was arrested. When Sasuke saw the questioning look in Naruto's eyes, he quickly wrote the explanation. They are charging him with the original attack on you, the one that left you deaf and partially blind. Naruto scowled. His teacher couldn't have had anything to do with that. He had been too busy training Team 7 for that to happen. Kakashi didn't have anything to do with what happened to me, Naruto said, turning his head to look out the window before turning to look at Sasuke again. I wouldn't be so sure of that, Sasuke wrote quickly. They seem to have plenty of evidence that says he did have something to do with it. Why would he? Naruto asked. What would he have to gain for having that done to me? Sasuke shrugged, but he silently agreed. Kakashi stood to lose his Chunin status if he was convicted, not to mention they could execute him for it. Sasuke didn't want that to happen, but he wasn't sure that he could stop it. He didn't know where to start looking to find out if Kakashi was innocent of the crime that he had been accused of. You have to prove he is innocent, Naruto told Sasuke. There has to be a reason somebody framed him. I don't know what it is, but I know they had to have a reason. My theory is that they want him out of the way so that they can have unlimited access to you. They couldn't do that if he was in the picture. Sasuke wrote, making Naruto frown. He hadn't thought of that possibility. Did that mean someone wanted Naruto dead? Probably not as much as he wanted himself dead, Naruto thought bitterly. He might not have to kill himself. He could just let whoever was after him do the trick. Sighing, Naruto closed his eyes, letting his thoughts take him to the situation with Kakashi. He still couldn't believe his team leader had been arrested. Kakashi had always claimed that he wanted to protect Naruto. So surely, he wouldn't have given that information to the Sound Village. Naruto didn't know what to think. With Kakashi out of the way, he was kind of scared of going back to the apartment. He didn't want to go there and find someone else waiting to beat the crap out him. Naruto had had enough beatings to last him a lifetime. He would be much happier if they would leave him alone. Naruto didn't believe that would happen anytime soon, making him wonder if it would be best if he left the village. Maybe then he could find a little peace, enough to take his life of course. He didn't want to live like this longer than he had to. Closing his eyes, Naruto tried to drift off to sleep once more, but this time sleep wouldn't come easily. His mind kept going over the fact that Kakashi had been arrested for supposedly planning the attack that had landed Naruto in this condition. Naruto didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to believe that someone he trusted could have the capability of something that could hurt someone he supposedly cared about. But what if he was wrong? What if Kakashi had planned it? It wasn't like it would be the first time someone he thought he could trust would betray him. Sighing, Naruto opened his eyes and stared up at the ceiling, trying to remember a time that Kakashi had given him the impression that he didn't want Naruto around. He couldn't think of any, so unless the man was one hell of an actor, then there was no way that Kakashi could have done it. The problem would be convincing everyone else, seeing as how most seemed to think that Kakashi was indeed guilty. Naruto wondered if the attack that had landed him in the hospital this time around had been when the so-called evidence had been planted. It had been the perfect opportunity because Naruto had left and Kakashi and Sasuke hadn't even been there to put a stop to it. Naruto groaned, his head hurting. All this thinking about what could have happened was giving him a headache, something he didn't need. He wondered if leaving the village would make it easier on those around him. After all, they wouldn't have to worry about protecting him anymore. Naruto could learn to take care of himself, until the time came to end it, that is. He must never forget about his end goal. Even though it might look like he was adjusting, Naruto had no intention of ever becoming used to his new way of life. Too bad for those who claimed to care about him, they wouldn't be able to stop him. Glancing at a sleeping Sasuke, Naruto wondered if now would be a good time to make his escape. After all, no one was expecting him to just up and leave. The only problem was his lung. It still hurt to draw in a deep breath. Still, Naruto had the feeling that if he didn't leave now, he wouldn't have the opportunity to escape from this life again. He knew his teammates would be right there harassing him into not giving up on his not-so-hopeless life. What did they know? Naruto thought bitterly. They hadn't had to live with the abuse that Naruto had, so it wasn't like he could explain it to them. Taking a deep breath, Naruto closed his eyes and released his breath. He knew what he had to do now, and though it wasn't going to be easy, he believed that it would be best for all involved in his ever bigger growing mess. Sitting up, Naruto silently pulled the needles out of his arm. Sliding his legs over the side of the bed, he kept glancing at Sasuke to make sure the Uchiha stayed put. The last thing Naruto needed was for the boy to wake up and demand to know what Naruto was doing. Standing, Naruto took another breath, testing his lung out. When he didn't feel any excruciating amount of pain, Naruto started quietly shuffling towards the door. Once he exited the room, he quickly made his way down the hall, knowing that half of the staff wouldn't care what he was doing. They would be glad that the demon was out of their care. Taking the stairway, Naruto quickly exited the hospital and made his way to Kakashi's apartment, where his stuff was currently stored. Upon entering the apartment, Naruto noticed that it had been ransacked. Whoever had been here looking for evidence of Kakashi's wrongdoing had certainly turned the apartment upside down. He almost felt sorry for whoever had framed Kakashi, because once Kakashi had proved his innocence, nothing would stop the man from finding whomever had framed him. They would be dealt with the same manner that Kakashi had been dealt with. Clearing his head of all thoughts, Naruto quickly backed his bag and left his headband on the bed. He wouldn't be needing it where he was going. He hated giving up on something he had spent his entire life fighting for, but knowing that there would be no improvement on his part shattered his young heart. He needed to be a ninja like one needed air to breathe. Without that, how could he survive or prove to people that he wasn't the monster they thought him to be? Without his career as a ninja, Naruto knew he would never gain the respect of the village. Without the respect, Naruto knew he would likely die alone and not cared for. Once he had finished throwing his belongings together, Naruto exited the apartment, not intending for anyone to ever find him. He would have liked to have a decent burial, but it came down to the people caring about him, in which they did not. So Naruto knew disappearing was his only chance to go out the way he wanted to. Walking down the street, Naruto felt eyes on his back as he headed towards the village gates. He hoped that this bit of news wouldn't reach the Hokage before he was able to get a good distance away. He didn't want Iruka to be the one to find him. He knew it would destroy the older man to find Naruto's body in the condition it was going to be in. That's one of the main reasons Naruto thought it was a good idea to go away to kill himself. No one would have to deal with the mess of what was left of him. The only one who would even care to look would be Iruka, but the way Naruto figured it. If Iruka couldn't find him, then maybe he would believe that he was still alive out there somewhere. His heart hurt knowing what he was about to put Iruka through. He was the one person Naruto didn't want to hurt, but in order for Naruto to be free it was going to happen. I hope you can forgive me one day, Iruka, Naruto murmured as he exited the gates, still not quite sure where he should go. Hitching his back over his shoulders, Naruto became determined he wouldn't look back at the village that hated him so much. As he walked he didn't hear the sound of footsteps behind him, until he felt someone grab his shoulder. Whipping around, Naruto glared at Sasuke, who was breathing heavily and glaring right back at Naruto. What the hell do you think you are going? I thought you had given up on this killing yourself nonsense. Sasuke rode as quickly as he could in the dimming light. He knew Naruto couldn't see all that well and he didn't want to make things harder for him. Right now though, Sasuke was ready to throttle him. He had suspected Naruto would try something like this, because Naruto was pretty desperate. Sasuke was desperate to make him see that there were still things worth living for. Why can't you let me go through with my plans? Naruto asked, looking down at the ground. It would be much easier on everyone involved if I didn't exist anymore. Sasuke glared at him. Naruto hadn't expected the Uchiha to understand how he felt. After all, Sasuke had grown up with his parents and his brother. He didn't know the true meaning of being alone in the world, with no one to care about you except for yourself. Sasuke shook his head. He wished he could make Naruto see that he had people who cared about what happened to him, that would care whether he died or not. Sasuke knew Naruto was feeling abandoned and helpless and like nothing else even mattered. That wasn't true. Iruka cared for Naruto like he was a younger brother. Sasuke knew that Iruka would be devastated if something happened to Naruto. That's why Sasuke couldn't allow this to happen. If they were going to prove Kakashi's innocence, they were going to need all of Team 7 and Naruto was a part of the team, even if Sasuke didn't always like it.